Any kind of correlation to TikTok usage? Or?
The only thing I could find was that if you used it between 30 minutes and an hour, there was a lot more overlap depending on the questions. But that is not the biggest, well, that is one of the biggest groups. But if you look at it overall, no, there's no correlation. In fact, X is a bit of an outlier in this in terms of having extremist views. Then obviously
was it correlated to what, like a causation kind of thing, if people were not using X versus people using it? Or, I mean, there's one thing, you know, if some person before didn't use X and they started to use X, or someone, you know, didn't use TikTok and started to use TikTok, versus people that simply choose, because you can have a bias, you know.
Absolutely. It doesn't say anything about the correlation. So it's just looking at, and this is also, I mean, it's not a great study according to me. So what they've looked at is basically, okay, we have they've asked, are you a user of X? Yes or no. Are you a user of Instagram? Yes or no, and so on. Now, they don't have a control group. We don't actually know who doesn't use any of the platforms, and who uses
anything about changing the usage?
No, not at all.
Are a user.
So simply this. Now, but this has been shared all over X. This has been, I believe, retweeted by Elon Musk. It's been brought up in a lot of news sources as well, but I cannot replicate it. It's so interesting. You know, you put the data, you share the data, and it does not hold.
But it's interesting. So someone wants to put out an argument, and they want to give credibility to it by publishing the data, cynically knowing no one will check the data.
Exactly.
Is that what happens?
Yeah, but I think so, absolutely. Because he has a repo, and there's like, you can look at like the issues in the repos, and there are no issues with this. And I cannot. I look at the data and I cannot find it.
Do they have any like notebooks in the repo, so you could?
Yeah, there is a notebook that I went through, but it's basically not really showing what this graph is showing. And then I was just looking, because I think it's better when you have a survey like this. You kind of look at the whole survey, you look at all the questions, and then you ask yourself, you know, what is reasonable? What are some reasonable assumptions? And then you can plot, you know, you can look at, okay, what about the different groups, for example? I mean, if you use it between 0 and 30 minutes to an hour, and so on. And there you see a little bit of a trend that the more you use it, the more extremist views.
And what was the tweet was it Anthony that actually published this, or who?
Yeah, it's his. It's his.
And what did he actually say in a tweet, or wherever he?
I don't know exactly. I mean, yeah, maybe we can just.
But it's something along the lines that people that use TikTok more than 30 minutes a day are potentially more anti-Semitic. Yeah.
So basically, what he said that TikTok users that use TikTok more than 30 minutes a day, it increases the likelihood.
So he said increase S as well.
Increases
that
the likelihood.
A causation.
Yes. And it just, I mean, obviously the study is just looking at, you know, users versus non-users and no control. And there's no, this is the, I think.
Can you go back up? Use him, increases, Because if you read this, you would assume that it is because they use, TikTok that they actually.
Oh, absolutely.
Have, right?
Absolutely.
But it's quite crazy now. Now we're looking at the New York Sun. I don't know how reputable that.
I'm not sure it's very reputable.
But it's like shocking news from the latest research. So someone picks up on it, and because you've done it in such a way, the data is there. Everybody just assumes it's nice. And now as a data scientist, the data is here. Let's see if I can replicate the results, and you can't.
And I don't really like social media. Like I'm not the person that would go on X and be like, oh look, I found this doesn't hold. But I wish I were. So you know, this is my challenge to people that just look into the data and try to replicate this and see what they actually come up with.
I think you are a role model in the sense that you actually try to look at the data and actually make some.
Yeah, but this is also so scary with this whole thing.
And that's kind of scary that so few people do that, and potentially even Elon Musk tweets something that is potentially bad for Twitter, right? That is your conclusion. conclusion, basically.
Yes. Well.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So,
can I ask you to repeat actually what you'd found on your analytics, because we started streaming after you finished that part. So I think the listeners are right now in the middle of the discussion.
Yeah.
So tell us about repeat about your findings.
So basically. So Anthony Goldblum, who is the founder and the former CEO of Kaggle, and Kaggle, right? It's this data science platform, really, where companies can put up data sets, and you have data scientists or aspiring data scientists that look at those and they do some analysis and so on. He's created a very reputable company. Now he posts on X a survey that he has made, or he has asked the company to create this survey that surveyed over 1,000 Americans from across the US, different states, and they surveyed them on their use of social media, specifically TikTok, Instagram, and X, or Twitter. And they looked at, so they asked, how often do you use these three platforms? How much do you use them per day on average? And then he's also asked them about views that they hold, specifically in this case, anti-Semitic or anti-Palestinian views. And he found, or rather he claims that he found, that users that use TikTok more than 30 minutes a day, if you use TikTok more than 30 minutes a day, it increases the likelihood of having anti-Semitic views by 17%.
And it's a bold claim. He's using a lingo that infers causation, correlation.
Yeah.
Not correlation.
Causation, actually. Causation,
Yes.
quite big difference.
That's a big difference, and it's not even a question that would be able to make that claim with, right?
No, exactly, because the survey only asked about current use.
So step one, the survey design is not designed to have any inference on causation. Actually,
exactly.
To use a lingo on causation in a survey that cannot give causation, that is
that's problem number
one.
Yes,
that is strike one. Strike two, strike three, then you're out. And then the second one is like, when you look at the data then as a data scientist, can you replicate his work?
Yeah, exactly. And when I look at the data, I like to look at kind of an overview, kind of like, looking at, this various claims or views and the users to say they agree or disagree with them. And what I see is instead kind of the opposite trend. I see that in general, the use of social media increases the likelihood of having extremist views. Rather, I shouldn't say likelihood, but there is a correlation between the usage, according to the study. There's a correlation between the usage of a social media platform and having extremist views.
So you can get correlation data. You don't know if it's causation, but you can get correlation data. But that correlation data is actually a different type of correlation than the one he claims.
Yes, and you don't actually know how many studies that he has paid for. Maybe this is the 10th study, and it's only the one that shows. But yet I look at this data, and what I can see is it rather the X users or the Twitter users that stand out in this, in that they hold more extremist views.
So
is what it seems.
I'm so eager to try to use like code interpreter in ChatGPT or something, just throw in the data there and see what it actually does say. But I trust you more on this.
But there's so many dimensions in this, because it also highlights the whole problem we have now. The whole conversation seems, why Elon Musk took over Twitter, right? Like, we need to have an open debate, we need to have facts and all that. And of course, it just proves over and over and over again that this is a major problem now. We are creating filter bubbles, we are creating fake news, and now it really also highlights that people are now even doing examples, and they're trying to sound more scientific, and they're even cynical enough to add a data set in order to make it sound good, and it goes viral. We have now found several different links and articles, newspapers picking
including
up.
Elon Musk actually, retweeting it, even though it actually are saying something negative about his platform.
But the whole thing is bullshit because
Yes.
First of all, you cannot have causation. You cannot draw the conclusion from the data sets. That's step one. Strike one. Strike two is that, well, when you look at the correlation in the data set, it actually points in a completely different different way. So strike three is a little bit like you are posting a data set that actually is disproving you. So cynical are you in order to make yourself look good. So this strike three, you're out. Well, like it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible.
That he shows where these 1,323 people are and who they are and how they are distributed along, the net, or where do they live, and etc. Because it's easy if you find a group of 1,300 people and ask them like, what do you think about this? Then everybody are going to answer quite similar because they are in a similar group.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. So there is bias immediately from the start. So it's just basically not opening up the database or how the data has been gathered.
Yeah, but
there is like already bias from the beginning, right?
We're trying to look good and trying to look more professional, scientific, and it's absolute bullshit all the way through.
But this is like Fox News, according to many. How many?
I kind of love.
He was an expert in this as well.
According to many.
I kind of, in a way, I kind of love this. This is just blatant lying. It's very simple. It's not just, I skewed the statistics slightly, so now it looks better. No, this is just
bullshit.
I don't care.
Just to close this topic off, do you think AI with LLMs, in the hands of everyone, will help this problem go away in some way? That people can more easily analyze the data.
If you have the data set, you can plug it in, as you said.
Yeah, I wish I could say yes. I think in general, this is something. Well, today you can. This was published only a couple of days ago. Dataset is online, is public for everyone. I think there is a threshold there, and the threshold is still a little too big.
Because people don't have the expertise that you have, but if they do have the help of an AI that can help you with the data analysis work, perhaps more people can be more empowered to understand the data properly, right?
I mean, it would be great. I think in general, like just knowing a little bit of statistics and just kind of asking the right questions, like questioning it, I think it's just the more important thing than, sure, you can use a tool to understand this. That'd be great.
But we will need data literacy. We have this conversation over and over again.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be data literate, and how can we educate ourselves to be data literate?
But perhaps also with generative AI, and you have so much data out there, text, images, audio that is generated, will bring a bigger sense of skepticism that you actually do reflect on, as you say, the data more. So perhaps it is a good thing, or?
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad thing. I'm just thinking that it's like, is this really going to help? I think in general, just being a little more critical, I think is.
But it also highlights, what do we need to learn in school, right? Now, the old way of doing tests, okay, now you can cheat on that with ChatGPT. But if you flip it, actually, we need a different type of education. We need a more critical thinking. We need to be more competent in how to use statistics, to how to understand the differences in bias and correlation, causation. We need to have the fundamentals of how you understand a text, critique it, what's the source from. So it sort of alleviates the game. It's not like we should forbid.
I love the way the discussion started here, and I hope it continues. Actually, speaking about hardcore data analytical kind of discussions. And with that, I love to very much welcome you here.
Thank you,
Kajsa Norin, an AI and data expert, as we heard, and also an LLM expert or NLP expert, I would say. Also co-founder of Stockholm AI, right? And we met a number of times now, just the recent weeks, for one in the Dairy Awards on Tuesday. So great to see you then. But I think especially on last Friday, where you had this kind of dance show, if you call it that.
I didn't have a dance show, but I made an AI that made a dance show.
Okay. So you helped produce a dance show with an AI-generated choreography
Yes.
for that. And we will get back to that shortly, but that was truly an amazing experience. So that will be a fun discussion topic coming up soon, speaking more about educated ether and whatnot. And I love especially the plastic lake kind of thing. We have to speak more about the plastic lake.
Yes, we will. And the Danish iteration.
Yeah. The Danish what?
The Danish iteration of the model. I will tell you about this. Very fun.
Do you understand what I say when I say the plastic lake?
No, not a clue. I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, me as well. But with that, who is really Kajsa Norin? How would you describe your background and your passion and interests?
Oh, good question. I mean, I like to say, like, people ask me what I do, right? My mom asks me what I do, and I never know what to respond. But I tend to say that, like, I work with text, right? I do machine learning. I do data science, data analysis, where the underlying data is text. I like languages. I love languages. And that's kind of how I came into the field of NLP, like almost 10 years ago now. So just anything that has to do with text or text data, and then building on top of that. And obviously now there's a lot of talks about LLMs. You know, obviously everyone wants to use them or implement them and so on. So that's nowadays a very big part of what I do as well. Yeah.
And if you just were to describe a bit your background, what did you study and how did you come to perhaps start, working with Stockholm AI and that kind of?
Yeah. So I studied engineering physics in Uppsala. My master is in, what do you call it in English? Like computation, numerical computation, I think you call it in English.
Vad var det svenska?
Beräkningsteknik.
Beräkningsteknik.
Yes.
Nice.
I don't actually, I realized that I should have.
Numerical computation?
Yeah, numerical computation, probably. Anyway, this was 10 years ago. So, yeah, and then I did my master's thesis at Gavagai. And I mean, you've had Fredrik Olsson on this. Yeah, exactly. You've had Fredrik Olsson on this podcast. Magnus Sahlgren was there. My supervisor was Jussi Karlgren.
So
yeah, exactly. So it's
you
it's
can't
great.
get more NLP than that.
This is the NLP of the NLPs in Nordics, or Sweden at least.
No. I mean, fantastic company. I'm really happy that that's kind of where I got to start, because that is where I got my first experience in machine learning. Actually, there were, like, back then, this was 10 years ago, or maybe 15.
And before the Transformer times, right?
Yeah.
Before the Transformer times. So yeah, when I was, when I was studying university, you get this bunch of elective courses, right? And one of them was machine learning. You could take machine learning. But I thought that, well, I'm not that interested in mechanics. So I didn't take machine learning. I was looking at data mining.
Mechanics.
You misunderstood
I completely misunderstood the term.
Machine learning was
this was before machine learning was like a term that people knew. So I thought it was some kind of mechanics, and I thought that that's not really my thing. I'm going to stick to the analysis part and stuff statistics and stuff that I like. So yeah, I missed the opportunity to actually study machine learning. So I've never studied it. But then I did my master's thesis at Gavagai, and I learned, all of a sudden I realized that, I'm doing my master's thesis in machine learning.
Machine learning, the course I didn't take.
Exactly.
Was it at that time before Transformers? Was it like word embeddings, or what type of technology did you focus on?
Word to vec. Now I did my thesis on the flashback forum. I did my thesis on that. So I would like download lots of subforums that I would analyze, the threads and like how they continue and so on. I used hidden Markov chains for this.
Okay.
What is that? Hidden markup chains in a nutshell.
Wow, this was 10 years ago. But essentially, it's a way to model states. And the states are hidden. So this was the idea that a conversation is basically the users are having, it's the humans behind it, and they have some kind of state, but there's a hidden state, right? But you see the output, which is the sentence, right? The comment
words
that they make, the words on flashback. So then it was more about like predicting where will this conversation continue based on what we believed were the hidden states.
Okay.
Did not really, or how long were the conversations. We looked at sentiment and so on. But this was also, before there were any really good models for Swedish. So I did a lot of, basically a lot of like kind of old school analysis on this.
Stemming and trying to
Stemming,
normalize.
lemmatization, removing stop words, etc.
Traditional NLP stuff.
Yes. Yeah. Which is funny, because it still works. Now, maybe it didn't work great on flashback in determining.
Still work? What do you mean? I mean, you wouldn't do that much stemming today, would you?
Well, I mean, if you do, I still think that it's like, I mean, if you want to find synonyms, for example, or find root words, it's not something that is unthinkable to do.
But less important, at least, with the transformers.
Yes,
right?
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so I posted on LinkedIn, we're going to have a great discussion today. And at some point in time during this 2 hours, let's have this NLP before and after the transformer. Ooh. NLP before and after large language models and foundation models. NLP before and after ChatGPT, and then to top it off, NLP before and after Gemini.
Ooh,
I
like that.
Could we sort of structure this? What was that all about at that point in time? So that is sort of the expose here. Really.
I remember, I worked with NLP for a long time as well, and in one sense, I was very excited when I saw the transformer paper coming out. But at the same time, it's also kind of annoying that all the techniques that you used before wasn't that useful anymore. What did you feel when the paper came out?
I got to be honest with you on this. I don't think I felt that much. I was back then. I was more working as a general data scientist. I was more on the implementation side, so it didn't really matter that much. I think also for things that I know we did back then, was working a lot. I was working at a retail company back then, or an e-commerce company, and we used the keywords a lot. Yes. And they were kind of, nowadays, of course, you can take out, there are lots of different ways to take out keywords, but also, TF-IDF it still works.
That does work.
Yes,
well,
I know, and you have a whole of Elasticsearch that is based on it. So.
Yes.
But the background here, like you came in, you did your master thesis, and then where's your starting point of your career, and where's the starting point into being part of founding?
Yeah, so I started working as a data scientist for this. For Fyndiq. Now they're part of CDON. It's the biggest marketplace in the Nordics these days. Back then it was a little smaller. So I started working as a data scientist there. So more kind of general data science work, a lot of analysis. What use
cases at that point?
Yeah, so recommender systems. Yeah. We were launching an app with, and now I need to get my numbers straight, but what I remember is that I think we had around 10 million products or something like that. In the end, we got over 1 million users in the app, so quite a large system. And when you then create a recommender system for that, when you have products with no data, you might have products that you want to filter out. You also need to build a very large scale system, obviously, because you have 1 million users. And then a couple of million products and so on. So that was a very, very big thing, recommender systems. Another thing that I stumbled upon back then that I've stumbled upon many, many times after that is similarity search. Basically, so basically just, you look at a product and you see similar products underneath it. And we base this off of keywords that the merchant provide. I think we took them out or the merchant provided them, don't really remember. But it worked really well. And, so you click a product, you then scroll down underneath it, you might click the second product, and then all of a sudden you're in a loophole. So it's a bit like YouTube, you get recommendations and then you watch a video and you continue and continue and continue. And it's funny, similarity search generally works fairly well, and it has a lot of applications that people don't really think about.
So we don't use it enough you could probably have that approaches in many more things or approaches than you realize.
I think so. I think people tend to think about recommender systems. They tend to think about that, yes, but we want to personalize this app or this website or something like that. But I think in general...
You can come very far with a similarity search.
Yes, because as a user, you often know what you're interested in. I was working as a consultant now many years later. I was working for a podcast platform. Maybe we're on... I don't think we're on that one. Well, yeah, we should be because
we are on all of them.
What's that?
We are most of them.
Okay, perfect. It was Podme, owned by Schibsted, and what I did there was basically, they wanted to have a recommender system, but what I started working on instead was a solution where you listen to a podcast or a podcast episode, and then you get recommendations based on that specific podcast episode. Which is, very simple. Similarity search. Yeah. Similar thing with Spotify, right? I mean, you go to song radio and you get, a bunch of similar songs. That's also similarity search. A little bit of fancy stuff on top of it, but similarity search.
Content-based recommendations. You could also, if you want to find a nice word for it, I guess. And I do remember the Paltorian days as well. I mean, the similarity search, even if it's semantic, especially if it's semantic similarity search, I mean, it is truly useful. And having the user have control of what you want to find is actually something that most users appreciate a lot. Yeah. Right. So yeah, I certainly agree. The similarity search is probably one of the first use cases that so many companies should start with. Right?
Absolutely. And I think the control part is really interesting as well. I did a little presentation on this, basically like how do you interact with AI systems? And I think that at least, speaking of how is AI before and after ChatGPT, I think that before ChatGPT is more that you want to hide it, right? You might, Netflix, for example, they do recommendations, super fancy stuff underneath, but they want to hide it. So it's just very smooth experience. But nowadays, maybe you actually can give the user a little more control. You're going to say, oh, we work with AI, you can use a prompt here, or for example, Steam, the gaming platform, they have recommender systems, and you have little sliders. Yeah. So you can drag them. Like, do you want to go like mainstream or indie? Do you want to have, and a couple of other things that you can kind of drag and so on. And I think there is something to that. We want a little more control.
Self-service in AI usage, not hidden.
Yeah, exactly.
Should we just quickly go through a bit? What was really the origin of Stockholm AI, and how did you end up co-creating it or co-founding it?
So basically, we were very simple, just a group of people, and we were holding like regular meetups or kind of like gatherings, really. This was back in 2016, I think. And we realized that, we're a group of people, we're growing, and we realized that we were facing the same problems, even though we work in different industries, even though we have different backgrounds. We're all data scientists, ML engineers, something like that. And we have a lot of things to learn from each other. We have a lot that we want to share. So basically, we got together. We founded a nonprofit organization that we called Stockholm AI. And back then, Facebook was also pretty big. So we had a big kind of Facebook page and so on, where we basically, like, I was going to say collect people, but basically we had...
You built a community. You
exactly.
built a community around the social media platform.
But I think also, I think the main thing was just that we had a lot of meetups. We just had a lot of, and not just the formal ones where you get, 100, 150 people, but also like the smaller hacks, right? We would gather, 10, 15 people, maybe I think it was like regularly like Wednesday evenings, and we would just get together and hack. People would bring a computer and just like, let's just sit together and chat. And it was basically every single week.
But this is one of the rabbit holes. We could take it now. But like starting communities, being part of communities, I think is so important. We're going to talk about, how the hell do you navigate when in all this noise, and who do you look for help? But what is your learnings here, mechanics to make a community work? Because I think you grew this very successfully. Like how many members in Stockholm AI now?
Well, it depends on how you count, but around 2,000.
Around 2,000, right?
Yes, some more active than others. But in general, also our meetups were almost always full, even though we charged for them.
Yeah, and the key trick here, what was the success factor, so to speak? What do you think made this work?
Well, first, you got to have a little bit of hype.
Yeah.
There was
that
a lot
we
of,
have. That we have.
Yes, that we have today, absolutely. I think there was there is still always a general interest in AI, but just it was up and coming, it was growing, and it was nice to gather people that didn't have anywhere else to gather. So that's kind of one part of it. But I think also just having those kind of regular meetings. The idea being that, it doesn't have to be hard to just gather a group of people and come together. I think that is the main thing. We tend to think of like social gatherings and meetups and so on as so big and kind of
a lot of work.
Yes, exactly.
But so could you, because you had the drivers were there, but then the mechanics, one of the key success factors, as I think, is that you were very consistent in having meetups.
Yes, absolutely.
That is
the
the
whole point.
Key critical success factor.
Yes.
You just fucking get the meetups up and running, and we do it consistently. And then in the end, people change their behavior. They tap into this and start going. Is that one of the main?
I think absolutely. I mean, you have this, you have the theory, right, of how do people become friends, and it's not so much about getting the two the people that are absolutely right for you, that how you have the most in common, but it's more about if you meet them often enough, and it doesn't have to be advanced, it doesn't have to be fancy dinners, it doesn't have to be anything like that. It's just you just got to see them often, and it has to be very simple, and that's how you get people together. And it's also something that I think we realized we have a lot of value in that. There's a lot of value in just bringing people together, letting them talk. It's not so much about the content of the meetup. It's just about getting people together.
But how did you organize that? Because then you have this pressure every week to have to have good content, to have to prepare, or you skip that and
we skipped it entirely. I think there were two. Let me rephrase. There were, I guess, two main types of events that we had. We had the regular kind of hacks happening almost every single week, where it was literally you just send out an invite saying same old place, see you there,
without even saying what to talk about, or
there was no talk. It was just like, let's just get together, hang out, grab your computer. There's always someone with something new and interesting, right? And this was in central Stockholm, Stureplan, so very easy for people to get to as well. Just after work. So very, very easy. And I think that kind of created a nice kind of foundation for it. And then we had the other larger meetups that we held, I think roughly every month, where we had a sponsor. We would often be at various offices and then talk about, whatever kind of made sense.
So the one part of the community building is just consistency. We get there, what is open mic, it's a little bit like, come, bring your case, bring your topic, show what you've done, and then because the unstructured is actually part of the success, I think, in that type of meetup. And then you have the other part where it's a little bit more structured. You have, like you were doing at the Spotify, you love to host these.
We were required because of recruiting.
I was going to say it nicely, but you said it bluntly. You love to host these topics, and then there are 10 more jobs here for data engineers and data scientists. You did it really well, by the way. That worked for you guys, didn't it?
And we had more people than Stockholm AI.
I bet you did. And the meetups were free too, right?
Yes.
So yes.
And we offered free beer and burgers.
Yes.
That usually works. Beers and burgers.
Cheapest recruitment trick in the book, my friends.
Yes. But I think it's awesome, of course, to have communities. It really builds up the knowledge and share knowledge and build up the understanding of AI, and it's really important, I think.
Super important.
Yeah.
Should we move perhaps to one of the top topics, I think, educated ether? Yes. And please describe a bit about what it really is, what the origin was, and perhaps you can start with what is educated ether?
Yeah, so can I start from just what is this project actually?
Okay.
Yes, please.
So basically about 2 years ago, so in order to kind of set the stage here, this was 1 year before ChatGPT
that's
was
an important piece of information.
It is actually an important piece of information. Instruction tuning was not a thing back then. But 2 years ago, this director, he's been a director in circus before, Cirkus Cirkör in the Nordics, and kind of generally an art producer. And he contacted me, and he said, I want my own AI assistant. So I want this AI assistant, and I wanted to know all about my previous works. And I wanted to know, all about like how I express myself, the things I like to write about, the things I like to think about. And also, I want to be able to feed this with new information, right? To be kind of constantly inspired. And the idea was also kind of in the end that this was something that would do a little bit of work for him. Send in applications to like Kulturrådet and various places where you get grants for money and so on. So that's kind of where it started. And
what a crazy idea! So cool but from a cultural person. I mean,
that has from a non-technical person.
A non-technical person. I need an AI assistant pre-ChatGPT.
Yes, and I thought being a consultant, I was like, okay, I'm going to mess this up. This is like let's put expectations really, really low here. I basically said, okay, we'll try to do this. We don't know how we're going to end up and so on, but we'll see. And he was fine with that. And we were debating a little bit because GPT-3 had come out back then. So we were debating using that, but you couldn't really. Well, there was some ways of fine tuning it, but it wouldn't really work for this. And we were also really interested in just the open source. It was kind of part of this project, having an open source model for this as well. So that was kind of a requirement. And then, sorry.
No, okay. I'm listening.
And then back then, Eleuther AI, which is this kind of AI collective in the US, they're kind of all over the world, but they had recently released the back then biggest open source GPT model called GPT-J. And it had a whopping 7 billion parameters, huge back then. So today it's something you can run on your computer, but back then it was really, really big. Yes. So, and we decided to train that, to fine tune it based on his data. But I should really say train it because there was no way of fine tuning it. What I did was that I set up the foundation training on the TPUs. So I got...
Use Google Cloud then?
Yes, I had to use Google Cloud. We got a grant from the TPU research program of 500,000 Swedish crowns to do this because TPUs are really, really expensive. We used quite a lot of this because there was a lot of setup. It's a lot easier today.
You need to just basically, figure out a lot of the engineering here from.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's basically just because fine tuning in a way you can just continue the pre-training, right? So that was essentially what we did, and it worked surprisingly well. We didn't have a lot of data, so we had about. 70? We started with 70 pages of text, and we realized that, okay, this actually works pretty well. And then he managed to get some more data from his previous works, and then we got up to 250 pages. So think of like kind of thin book, really.
So so you have the model, and you're now training it like a couple of passes on 250 pages.
Yeah, exactly. And back then it was also. This is seen as quite a big model, and it was kind of unthinkable to train a model on such a small data set. Nowadays, it's quite standard to do. We realize that, bigger models generalize really well on smaller data sets, but back then it was not something that was...
But this wasn't intuitive.
No.
This is something we have learned by experimenting, I would say.
I would say, I think now it makes perfect sense, right?
But it wasn't then.
No, I think it was something that people thought that, you can't use that little
shitty data. How can it impact 7 billion parameters?
Exactly. And I was even talking to AI Sweden back then because they were quite interested in this project as well. And I told them about the results, and they were really surprised by it as well, because it just like it didn't really make sense. It didn't really make sense that it was possible to actually capture the tonality, capture the ideas from this little data set.
If you were to, for the more technical people, just describe a bit more how the training setup was. Did you have a special way? Did you freeze some layers? Did you have a specific way to do learning rate scheduling, or anything else that you can share potentially?
Let me see if I remember things correctly. I think it was so. One of the things that I realized is that only one epoch is needed.
What is
so basically an epoch is basically how. So normally when you train a model or fine tune a model, whatever, you go over the data multiple times because you want to. And you don't learn, you set something that is called learning rate, and you tend not to set it too high, so that it basically adapts to the data slowly. Now we realized in this case is that I did something at the first time, I did something like 10 epochs or something like that. And just to try it out. So basically 10 passes over the data. And I realized that I tested it, got some output from the model, and it was like, oh, wow, this is really, really good. And then I realized what had happened. What had happened was that it had captured exactly what was in the training data. It just overfitted so much that it was just repeating exactly what was in the training data. So it's really good in that sense, but
you didn't generalize. That's
overfitting, not generalizing.
Exactly, it didn't generalize. So we did instead was that we reduced it. I was like, okay, I reduced it at like 3 or 2, and then I realized that no, it's just 1 pass is enough. And yeah, I kept the learning rate fairly low. I mean, it's just like you're just training. You're just continuing the pre-training.
You use TensorFlow, PyTorch, Fast AI library,
JAX. JAX. Yeah,
Yeah,
because that was what it was trained with.
Oh.
So basically, what I did was that I set up the training structure that they had. So they were using JAX on TPUs. Now they were using a lot of. This was it was pretty. What we call it? It was maybe not straightforward to set it up. It's not something that I would use in a production solution. As a matter of fact, on JAX on the in the documentation, it does say that this is a research preview. Please do not use this. There are like bugs and sharp edges and so on. So it's.
I think that's a very interesting learning, because so many companies believe, it's open source. You have a repo here.
Yeah.
You can just put it in production. What could possibly go wrong? And then we can train it on the data. And no, that's not the case, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You have to be. Right.
And then. We didn't want to be dependent on those TPUs. They were really expensive. So when we continued with this project, we started using deep speed on GPUs instead. And that's how we got, first off, that lowered the cost quite substantially. And then deep speed is great. It's by Microsoft. Just generally a deep learning framework that is, at least in my opinion, super, super easy to use.
Still on Google Cloud then, or?
Yes, that was still on Google Cloud.
So you use a framework from Microsoft called DeepSpeed, but you were still running it on Google Cloud.
Yeah, exactly. So the framework is also, I believe it's open. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's open. Yeah, it has to be open source. Yeah.
Awesome. And I think we need to get to what did you actually use the AI for? So you trained it on some data that the director had.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you just describe what data that was?
Yeah, so this data was, first off, it was just a lot of descriptions of kind of his previous work, so very short descriptions.
So choreography only, or was it also the
kind of art performances in general? He is very experimental with a lot of things that he writes. So sometimes it's more kind of ideas that he has.
Can you give an example of a piece of text?
Yes, I can. So there's one, for example, that is where it first says kind of unreasonable fantasies. And then this is description of a man that walks into an elevator, and he gets sucked into the handle of the elevator. And when he is in this handle in the elevator, he realizes that there is another woman who lives in the handle of the elevator.
So this is his fantasies.
Yes.
His written fantasies.
And he realized that made this her home. And he realizes that the person that looks into the reflection of the elevator, like you have to look really close in this reflection to see that you see the reflection of yourself, the reflection of him, and then this woman who lives in there. Yes, so that's an example.
So example of all kinds of text. That's what we're talking.
Yes,
No,
yes.
I think the performance I watched makes more sense when you describe it like that. So, okay,
Yes.
so you train it on that kind of rather, what should you call it, abstract fantasy?
It's very,
kind of?
very abstract. And then there are some things that are a lot more straightforward, I have to say, kind of more descriptions of kind of choreography like you were onto, and art performances, thank you, that just maybe makes a little more sense or that are more straightforward.
And what is the choreography text? You know, how does that look like? Is it more like dance steps?
It's actually more kind of like to get a feeling of what it's supposed to be like. So it could be something like, you know, the actors do this, the lights are turned off, the audience are waiting, and then so on. And he writes in a very straightforward way. It's almost, I mean, he calls itself, he says himself that it's a little boring in a way when he writes this, because it's very just bland. But what he writes, yes, exactly, very instructional. But what he writes at the same time is also kind of very experimental, like the door handle of the elevator, for example.
Perhaps also, I thought one very interesting part of the actual show that they did have was the plastic lake kind of thing. I didn't understand it in the beginning, but when I heard you describe it afterwards, it made more sense. Okay.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly because I don't think he has.
I mean, it was this kind of like plastic, like frigolit, kind of things in like a small pool of frigolit or plastic. And then they had this kind of glass box of other plastic
things. This is the stage setting we're talking about in some way.
Yes. So I know that as I developed this model, I also talked to it a lot. I was using this a lot because I wanted to kind of get a feeling for it. It's not like we had a labeled data set and then you have an accuracy or something like that. No, I just had to use the model. So I got very, I got used to the instructions that it would give. And a lot of them are kind of based on nothing. It could be, for example, like you were on to, it's a plastic lake in the middle of the stage. And in this case, they have to actually figure out, what is a plastic lake? What does that look like? And try to interpret it in some way. And that is kind of what the whole dance performance is about. It's about the artist Olle Strandberg Colling, who then uses this AI. He lets it write 40 or 45 pages of text. And then he basically just tries to make all of this into a performance.
So basically, they started Olle prompting the model in some ways.
Yes.
And so a prompt, I want to show, and I want this, so he gives a prompt, and from the prompt, this comes out this crazy ideas as a stage show.
Well, the thing is that the prompts are very, very simple because the data is just the short descriptions and the scenes and so on. So what I did when I annotated data, I added like short description first, and then it comes the actual short description of a little performance or scene, and then there's a short description of the scene.
So you had to annotate 250 pages.
But that was fairly
easy. But it had to be done
because it was separated, so that was not a problem at all. But just to kind of make the model understand that this is a description of play, this is a scene. We also added some of his like diaries, some of his newsletters, some of his like kind of free flow thinking, basically, or like free flow writing. And then he basically had us like 45 pages of just letting the AI flow, like letting it just output whatever he wanted to output. And remember, this is first of all, is not instruction tuned. So you cannot actually say, write me something. You have to kind of be clever in this. But I think what he did was just letting it output, 45 pages, see where we end up. And this is GPTJ, 7 billion parameters, not a huge model by today's measures. So it's still very, kind of the ending didn't really fit in with the beginning and so on. There were things that maybe didn't really make sense. So the whole performance is then about, how does he work with this manuscript? Rather, how does he turn this into a manuscript that actually works? And I think it's interesting because it's actually like, it is his, in a way, like his words. It's the AI's words, but it's also his words. He did tell me that, chatting with this model or using this model is a little bit like talking to himself, but a weirder version of himself. And I think that's kind of, I thought that's pretty cool.
That's cool.
Okay, so just trying to understand for people that didn't see the show, I had the luxury of doing that. But so in short, you can say that the AI produced some kind of instructions or text that helped to manuscript or basically have some kind of way of setting up the show. And then you had real humans performing the dance mainly, and some singing as well, I guess, but mainly a lot of dancing. And in that way, trying to, I guess produce the idea that Olle, the director, had in some sense, right?
Yeah.
Is that a fair way to describe it?
I think pretty much so. I think that the way he has described it to me is also that he was just trying to use these 45 pages as kind of like, okay, I'm going to try to use this as a basis and kind of see where we go. What happens if I let the AI dictate this? What will actually happen?
I like that you said dictate, because in one way you can actually say that the AI is dictating what the humans should do.
Yes. And that also comes up in the performance, right? Where you have, so there is a speaker that will like say that will tell the actors to do certain things, or it will also tell how the audience should perceive the actors.
Right. So what do you think about this? Is this the type of, if we think like creative works or works of art in the future where we potentially are co-creating things with AI, is that a trend you think will increase?
I mean, yeah, I think it already has increased. What I think is interesting here is that it is like special to trained. Like it's not something that you can use ChatGPT for. And just it actually. So, and what I think is interesting then is not just like, the people that try to write a poem using ChatGPT. It might be a decent poem, but there is nothing artistic about it.
Isn't it? There can't be an artistic quality to AI generated content?
Yes, there can be, but I think it's also very uninteresting. It's a little bit like, and I think there's a lot of fascination right now with AI generated content. But I think it's a little bit like, and you see on like YouTube, and there's like a 7-year-old that plays a piano, and like the 7-year-old plays it really, really well, and there's like 60 million views, and people go, "Oh wow, this is amazing." If you remove the 7-year-old from the equation, and you just have some random person playing the piano, people will not be so enthusiastic. And I think it's kind of the same with the AI. If you say that AI has created this, it will be like, "Oh, that's really cool."
Cool. I thought we were going the other way and saying in the future, I mean, if we take like playing chess, I guess, I mean, today we know AI will beat any human at any time. But if you watch some game, potentially it's not that interesting to watch two AI play each other. It's more interesting to watch a human right?
And that's kind of my point. I think that right now there's a hype, right? And it's just that we are fascinated by the fact that AI can generate things that are human-like. And there is that fascination. But I think that soon we will be tired of the 7-year-old playing the piano. We'll be like, well, of course he plays it really well. So it's going to be like, okay, yeah, it's an AI generated and it's a little boring. And I think this is actually somewhere that the director Olle kind of already realized that yeah, okay, sure, you can generate content. That's not really interesting. What is interesting is, the interaction between the human and this model, and what happens if you actually start to kind of co-create with this. This is an experiment in a sense.
So I was trying to figure out, we know that AI is good at some things and humans may be good at some other things. And I guess that's why you should do co-creation in some way. But what will be the best setup for doing more creative work in the future? Will it be more using AI for something, whatever that is, and humans should do something else? Do you have any sense for what the main purpose for the human part of the co-creation should be, and what the main part of the AI part should be?
Well, I think one thing that is interesting with AI is that the AI can only it only has the history, right? I mean, sure, you can train it with a lot of your previous data, but you can never train it with your future data because that doesn't exist. So you are the person that creates the future data.
But AI can create future data as well.
Yeah, right? But it's not very interesting. So let me tell you. So as I've been doing this project together with Olle, this started 2 years ago, and obviously there's a lot of things that have happened since then. And I've gotten this question, yeah, but isn't that so easy to do today, right? I mean, you could just prompt ChatGPT, or you could just use a RAG, retrieval augmented generation, do something like that. So I tried using ChatGPT to actually generate the same forms. Yeah. This door handle, kind of getting sucked into the door handle and realizing that there's a reflection and so on. And you cannot do it. As a matter of fact, I prompted it 10 times with, first off, some of his works, what fit in the prompt. And I got very, very similar results each time. So similar that the title of some of the performances that the AI outputted was actually the same. I got Echoes of Time. Echoes of Time is an art performance that exists in ChatGPT, and I got in the output of that 3 times.
But I guess you could tweak the AI to have an increased temperature and in that way be more experimental.
I tried that too.
Yeah,
I tried that too. And what happens is that it doesn't actually get more experimental in this case. What happens is that it still uses the same format, still uses kind of the same general idea, but it uses other types of words, harder words, and then all of a sudden it starts to misspell things.
Okay, so trying to figure out, what the strength of a human is and the weaknesses of AI in some sense, is your thoughts that basically AI is less able to create really new creative work?
I think this was more ChatGPT thing. I think it's very much that, this was GPT-4, and I think that it's more that, it is very much fine-tuned on creating a specific type of output, which is really, really clear here. So I was doing it various ways, with the new thing where you can create your own GPTs, as they call it. Yes. You can upload your own data. I assume that it creates some kind of RAG in the back end. And I tried that as well, and I still got the same things. It's kind of very underwhelming. I thought that, this must be kind of solved by now. No, it wasn't.
Okay, so AI is rather non-creative.
Well, I think at least ChatGPT is rather non-creative. I think that it's actually, and I think it's so by design because it wants to be a very general model. I think creativity is also something that you have to have bad output in order to have good output. You know what I mean? You might have, maybe 70% of the output is bad, and then 20% is okay, 10% is good, 10% really creative. But as a normal user of ChatGPT, you're probably not using it for anything creative. You might want to answer a math question, or you want to respond to an email in a better way, and so on. And you don't want to have this 70% of bad output and then 10% great. You want things to be decent.
What do you think the next version of Educator Ether will be? Will there be a second version, you think?
I don't know. I mean, there has been talks about kind of making this more general. There is interest in general from the art community in, what if everyone could have something like this? Basically, basically trying this out. I think another thing that is also interesting that we did try out a little bit is just training it on books as well. And what is interesting when you kind of mix your own data, in this case, the 250 pages of like his thoughts and his works and so on, with the books, is that it kind of merges the ideas, which I think is quite interesting. And I think it's something that is quite hard to do with a prompt or with a RAG or something like that. So that's interesting. I don't know. I'm not an artist. I'm not a visionary, but I think we'll see.
It was an awesome experience to
Thank you.
actually see that. So thanks for that.
It's time for AI News, brought to you by AIAW Podcast.
Awesome. So we have this kind of middle break where we go through some of our personalized, if we call it that, or similarity-based kind of news favorites. And I
What's
guess
the news for the week?
Yeah, this week is hard.
Subjective from us.
It's one topic that I think tops
One
them
topic
all.
shadows everything else, maybe.
But perhaps anyone that wants to go first. Do you have some kind of favorite news article?
I mean, all of the news articles have been about Gemini, right? Yeah. Which is interesting, and it's about it seems to perform at least a little bit better than GPT-4. So far, nothing has been released, especially not in EU. And nothing is released in any other languages than English. Ultra, I think, will come. The biggest version of Gemini, Ultra, I think, will come first next year. So there is a little bit kind of.
So there's this hype now. This is like expectation sales. We've seen all that Google has dropped in terms of examples and stuff like that, but no one has really put their hands on it yet.
And I think what is really interesting is, what. So yes, we have all those benchmarks, right? And we have. It seems like it performs better than GPT-4, but will people actually feel that it does? I think a lot of people have gotten used to now ChatGPT, and it's rather kind of chatty experience, and the chatty output. You get very long answers, and in those long answers, you might actually find the answer that you're looking for. And I think that it's not just about the benchmarks, right? But it's also about like how do you use this as a user?
Should we just perhaps give a background first on Gemini? Hopefully
why is
we
it
have
a big
at least
deal?
one other article.
I have a couple of news, but let's start with the Gemini news. I think that's good.
Should I start and just
go for it?
Okay, so
we're gonna fight for the mic on this one. I think.
Yes, you start. Probably do. I mean, just the basics of it. Of course, ChatGPT has been on all the news, and they have been leading in the field of large language models for some time since OpenAI released it for more or less exactly 1 year, or 1 year and a couple of weeks. And now this week, Google, a bit ahead of time. I think it was planned to be released early next year, but they now released Gemini. And Gemini is another large language model that is also very multimodal. So I think that's one of the key benefits that they add, and they claim it's been trained from the start to be multimodal. So they can not only understand and generate text, but actually understand and generate audio and images and video in a way that I think is really impressive. And
but the big deal here, isn't it, that it's been built multimodal ground up? So it's not like bolting coding and audio on top or visuals on top, but the whole architecture is multimodal, which means they have worked on it for some time, obviously.
Yeah, and if we compare it to GPT-4, we know they added GPT-4V for vision recently, like an add-on later on. So obviously it wasn't trained for that to start with, and they added that later. But in reality, what they really did with Gemini is still, hard to say, because they haven't really released some, details. They had a technical paper that spoke a bit about it, but it was very shallow. It didn't include much details at all. But yes, that is truly what they do claim, that it was trained for multimodality to start with. And I think that is truly one of the more impressive things. So one example I saw was they could take like someone having a piece of paper and a pen, a human is writing with a pen on a paper the figure or picture of a guitar, and Gemini is looking at that and saying, it's a guitar, but at the same time it's also having an audio output where it makes the sound of a guitar. So that's awesome. And then he writes another like amplifier next to the guitar, and suddenly said, it's a guitar with an amplifier, and suddenly it's an electric guitar, and it had another audio output that also is sounding awesomely. So it's generating now electric guitar with an amplifier music that is, created from scratch. And then it adds a drum, basically, like a picture, handwritten picture of a drum. And suddenly now we have the electric guitar with an amplifier and a drum and music that sounds awesome. And it's like AI generated music with just writing or drawing some pictures. So I think this really captures one of the amazing things that this model can do that's never been possible before, to truly understand images and also understand audio and generate text, audio, and images in a way that is truly impressive.
And if this is true now, it really feels like real-time conversation. There's very little lag and all that. We don't know how that is in reality, but it's very, those examples they've posted are fluent. They're super nice in that sense.
And just to give some technical details, I mean, it were claiming in the technical report to be a 32,000 context window. So it's less than the biggest GPT-4 and Claude and others that have hundreds of thousands of context window. But still, it's semi-good. It's what actually GPT-4 had, I think, in the larger version with 32K. Also, they had like 3 versions of it. It's one Ultra, one Pro, and one Nano version. So... right.
Yeah, the nano version is really. There are 2 nano versions, I think. It's like one with roughly 1 billion.
8, I think.
Yeah, and then one with 3 or 4 billion.
Yeah, with 3, I think.
And the idea with those is that they're supposed to run in your smartphone. And I think I actually like where this is going, and I like that Google is kind of
figured this out from the beginning. They have 3 sizes for different for courses.
But also, I mean, it makes sense, right? I mean, you're always going to have quite a large latency, right? I mean, if you're using if you're using the API, I mean, do you know how long the latency is for GPT-4 API? It's
what is it? Do you know?
12 seconds on average. And then there's a GPT 3.5 Turbo. So Turbo is obviously really fast, right? It's 3 seconds. So it's really, really long. I mean, as a user, 3 seconds is actually really long if you're waiting for something to load. Now, if you're running something locally on your smartphone, it's going to be much, much faster. And I think it's interesting that they're realizing that, there's a lot of potential in these small models. Yes, they may not be as accurate, they may not be as capable, but they're going to be really fast. And I'm really curious about what that's going to happen, what it's going to do with the smartphone industry.
But when they have now figured out multimodality from scratch and these fundamentally different architectures depending on size and how you can use it, it really opens up that depending on your use case, it's quite obvious. This is a nano use case. The speed, the interaction, the flow in this more narrow space, that's what you need. And then, so I think it's so, I mean, like when you see it, it's obvious that's how it should be done, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, I think I think OpenAI and a lot of other companies as well are kind of focused on making bigger and bigger models, right? And I mean, yes, they're getting more and more capabilities and they're getting more and more accurate, but they're also getting a lot more expensive and the latency is a lot higher. And there's no easy way of solving this, right? I mean, we've seen OpenAI trying to, they're cutting down the accuracy a little bit in order to save some cost, which makes a lot of sense. But it also creates a less of a good user experience. If you then have the expectation that, yes, now I'm using the smartphone model, for example, it's going to be fast. Yeah, it doesn't cost me anything. It runs my phone, right? But it's, it's something that I can use. It's not an API. Obviously, the user is not going to care if it's an API or not, but still.
I mean, I think it's great that they actually do consider the engineering aspects of this, what you can use it for, what value it actually can provide, and not having like a trillion model parameter model running in a closed setting somewhere where you have to use an API, but actually having it embedded potentially in your phone. And they are going to put it in the Pixel 8 apparently. So it's going to be, or more or less are already part of existing phones, which is amazing. So
do you know what they're going to use it for?
No.
No, me neither. I'm just curious.
That sounded like you knew something we didn't know.
Sorry. No, I wish.
And is this the time when I now need to switch out my iPhone to a Google phone?
You should have done it anyway, but okay, now it's better time than any. No, but I think that's good. And then just to speak about the other versions, we have the Pro version, which is also available today. It's supposed to be in Google Bard, but
and what is the logic?
Sweden,
when should we use the Pro version?
In Sweden yet, but it's apparently available in US. And then they have the Ultimate version or something that's going to be available. Yeah, Ultra version.
Yeah,
Ultra.
That's going to be available next year in some kind of advanced Bard version or something else, probably paid for in some sense.
But what is your understanding for when to go Ultra and when to go Pro?
I don't think anyone knows.
Not yet.
I mean, it's not been released on the European markets, so I think we'll see. What I think is interesting in general is, I mean, Google has a great ecosystem, and this fits right into Google Cloud. I mean, sure, OpenAI has been, obviously they're in the hands of Microsoft now, and yes, there's an ecosystem behind that. But I think this is actually developed by DeepMind at Google. So it's something that will obviously be very, very, very much integrated in, I mean, both all over cloud, but also in their smartphones and so on. So I think really it's not always about having the best model, but it's having the best capabilities of integrating this.
Yes, finding the value for it and having the engineering. Exactly. It's not just the performance itself. It's like ChatGPT. I mean, before we had GPT-3, but it didn't have the application. It didn't have a system where people could interact with it and really experience the power of it. And I think a big thing with OpenAI was that they built ChatGPT, the actual interface on top of it that allowed anyone to use it. And in this case, Google goes even further, that enables it to actually put it in embedded systems, Pro, that will potentially be able to work for companies in different ways, and then Ultra, which is the most advanced case.
One of my main reflections when I read this and I saw this and oh shit, this is interesting. Google must have been biting their tongue, for a year, and they had to rush out Bard to have something to kind of come out, to combat all the negativity. Why don't you have ChatGPT? Because the CEO is quite clear. This is the biggest engineering undertaking ever in Google's history. That is his words, right? And to me, that means this is one of those massive projects that kind of has. Did you guys know about the Gemini, that they were working on it? How
they said that they were working on it, but
did you? I still felt like I didn't feel like I was on top of Google. Okay, this is what you've been doing. Did you? I honestly didn't understand Gemini was coming in this way.
Not really.
Did you know that? Maybe you did.
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering if Bard was just a way to kind of direct attention somewhere else,
That's, to me, Bard is just a blip that they had to do because the investors are pushing them.
Yeah, exactly.
This is the launch they were going
I'd heard about, they've been speaking about Gemini for some time, but I was expecting something else, I must say. Since I knew that it was coming from DeepMind, I was expecting them to have the kind of reinforcement learning, reasoning capability like AlphaZero. Or
you thought it was going to be even more?
I thought it would be, what QStar potentially is to OpenAI, but it's not apparently. And to my understanding, it is simply a language model with multimodality functionality. And yes, it has some better reasoning, and it does beat GPT-4 on most benchmarks, but not that much. And sometimes it does fail. I mean, to my understanding, and of course I'm speculating now, but the reasoning capabilities of Gemini is not that extreme. And I don't think it is what QStar potentially is whenever they release that in OpenAI. So I'm a bit disappointed, even though I thought it
was super cool.
Even though I'm really impressed, of course, with the multimodality aspects and ability to work with audio and images. In a good way.
Should we leave that topic? Is that enough? More on that topic? Any last points on the topic?
Just it's going so fast now, and I think you can reason about why did they choose to release it now and not before. I think they had a model for quite some time. I do think that Google is really careful about releasing something too quickly, and they had a lot of red teaming, safety aspects. From an ethical point of view, what is really the potential consequences of releasing this? I think that was a big part of they waiting at least a bit of releasing it. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think so too. But I think what is interesting is this it's always being the first mover is always, well, it's going to give you a lot of advantage, but at the same time, it's always the hardest thing, right? And it is something that OpenAI did. Is a lot of it's an engineering feat, and what Google seems to have done is essentially replicating it, successfully replicating it, maybe pushing the boundaries a little bit, but only slightly, really.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that is interesting. It is just a replication of an engineering feat.
But it's clear AI race for sure. But should we?
And that is a great cue, just for me to show you some statistics here. So if you want to look at how the things are going, just look at the data, and that is actually the money. So Google had this year, the last year, the entire year actually has increased the value for 43% this year. This is the stocks, right? While if you look at the Microsoft this year, has been going 130.76% this year in raise of the stocks value, right? So they did an incredible amount and effort and progress with the implementing OpenAI.
And I invested on the peak, so I lost money on Microsoft. I can say.
Well, this is going to just escalate. So I think this is going to go good. So right now you bet on both of companies, because if one loses, you win on the other one. That is how you quote in the game.
But what about Nvidia then?
Oh yeah, I have that, but we will come there.
Okay, because that's the interesting part, right?
Okay, Henrik.
No, do you want to take Nvidia first? I just want to look at it.
I will do the short ones on the end just to close.
Okay, all right. So I thought, to get some more news into here that is sort of more starstruck or a little bit more mainstream. Have you followed the Hollywood's? There's been AI guardrails and AI discussions in Hollywood. So there's been a strike going on in Hollywood around how to use AI, and of course then we have the Screen Actors Guild in Hollywood has been on a strike. So actually,
you're thinking of SAG-AFTRA.
SAG-AFTRA.
I actually saw them. I was in New York a couple of weeks ago. I saw them striking.
Yeah,
it's great, right? It's actors striking.
Yeah.
So they're going all out, right? They're just screaming, they're acting, it's great.
They're doing an Oscars with the we will not work.
Yes.
Yeah. But the whole background has been then, how do we understand the use of AI in Hollywood? Anything from computer-generated extras to cloning, to put, so all this stuff. So basically, they struck a deal in the end. It came out on, I think, Friday last week or something like that. And what does this mean? I mean, like in this is just the starting point for some shaky times if you're an actor in Hollywood.
What was the deal? What did they win?
So the deal is regulating and putting in guardrails how and when to use AI in order to basically, can I use AI? I have Robert De Niro. How can I do another movie with a Robert De Niro clone as an AI? Can I use his voice? How can I do it? If I use a lookalike, he's almost Robert De Niro, but it's not Robert De Niro. I do the new Indiana Jones.
But isn't that like a hypocrisy on the highest level? Don't they use duplicates and stuntmen all the time? Since for ages, right? And didn't they use what is called like AI-generated voices when people are basically not able to speak anymore, like the Maverick Top Gun one? So I guess it's about applying it when the person has agreed to it, or what about the CGI that they have been using in Avatar and all of this?
No, so the CGI stuff.
So for me, this is very hypocritical.
No, it's not. It's just more and more mature understanding for all the different nuances and complications. So CGI was a good start. That came. Then you had one part of this, and now we are going down to we can do a perfect Tom Cruise clone. So we all seen them, the deep fakes and all that. And basically now there's so many different opportunities depending on who you are as a very well-known actor. You can now, you can have the same actor in 10 different movies at the same time, right? He's working like a couple of minutes in each and then the rest is AI generated. And that means like, we're only going to have Brad Pitt movies and no other star actors. So this is one angle. The other angle is so ultimately there's of course this huge cost in when you shoot movies and you get all these people and obviously the actors are then striking to get some guardrails in on how and what you can do and not do. And so you could sort of say this is the next iteration on putting more concrete guardrails and restrictions on this. So it's very much AI regulations in relation to the movie world of Hollywood.
Well, I mean, I think it makes sense, right? And this is not just for actors, right? It's also for illustrators.
Of course, for all, of course. Yeah, much bigger.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you have in Midjourney, for example, I think at least previously you could, ask to create an image that resembled that resembled it. So, or in a style of some illustrator and so on. So, yeah, and it makes sense. I think it makes sense that it's like, yeah, of course, you need to ask the either actor or you need to ask, the person doing the illustration and so on. But I think what is interesting is then you have Beatles.
Yeah.
That with their
the
what is
song.
the what is the
They released
song?
a new song, right?
Yeah, exactly. They released a new song. I forgot the name of the song, but it's they haven't released a song in 30, 40 years or something like that now. And just a couple of weeks ago, they released a song where they have AI generated a couple of voices based on, all the previous material. And it's gotten great attention.
Now and Then.
Yeah, exactly. Now and Then. I think it's a great song.
But you should watch the documentary. It's really interesting.
Yes.
The bottom line is that they found a couple of tape recordings with John Lennon. They got them from Yoko Ono. And more or less like they could not separate his voice. So they were trying to get this done. They were working on Now and Then in 95. So John Lennon dies in the 70s. They tried to work on this tape in around 95. And then, of course, George Harrison is still alive. So he plays the guitars and they do a couple of tracks. But they have a problem to get John Lennon's voice clean, Then they go out again. So now they have the guitar tracks from George Harrison from 95. They have the voice on tape from John Lennon from the 70s, and now George Harrison and Ringo Starr kind of finishes off, and this time they don't even meet. and the key topic was that they could do a perfect cleanup of the voice channel. I mean, like so it's like the true last Beatles song where it's like all the different players has sort of contributed, and it's in a way an analog contribution, but it could never have happened without AI. That's the documentary perspective, at least. It's cool.
Yeah, it's super cool, and it's very fascinating. And they release a documentary around it and so on, and it's like you kind of like that story, right?
But
and
why is this that different? Why is that cool? And the artist striking about their rights is not cool. So
no.
Is it different?
Yes, I think the one major difference is that they have now used the real analog music, but they had to do things in order to separate it. So it's actually
but he didn't approve this, right? They just decided to do it.
So that's another legal topic. Who owns the tape, and would you want it? Yoko Ono owns the tape.
So that is the point. So as long as it serves the people that are doing it, it's fine. But everybody else will be striking. I was bowling on Monday, and when you're bowling, you shoot the ball, and then it goes and crosses all the cones and etc. Yeah. In the fifth, there was a person behind it who was actually aligning all the cones, and they strike because the system came. Right, and there were people in the 1900s that actually their job was to cut the ice and bring it to all the shafts that we have, including this one in the basement, and then throw the ice bucket, and that was actually the freezer. You put it behind. They also strike when the Freon came. It's just technology. It will never change.
No.
So there is nothing to do about it. I think that people need to start to look at it objectively and start preparing for what is coming, because it's just another way of working.
Yeah, but I think the core topic for me why this was an interesting news is it is used to show that this is everywhere and it affects all roles, all type of things,
yes.
and it's used to get this sort of, you know, Hollywood is Hollywood, and the AI topic and the AI.
Did you come to what was really the deal? What was the main points of it?
Yeah, remember? You can read it. But while you're doing that, I will go with the short ones here. By the way, when we are talking about AI stuff, especially for actors and etc., this is completely off our topics, but this was funny actually. So Doritos did this app called Doritos Silent, which you can apply to a computer and mobile, and removes the sound of you eating Doritos during a meeting, right? Super stupid example, but they have put like a lot of emphasis on it and it works. So over 5,000 different sounds of how you eat Doritos has been placed in this. So it was just funny. And now you can use this with Zoom and most of the. Now you can eat Doritos while you're having. Okay, so let's go with the second transitioning. I also, yes, also I had like a little bit of joke. You said like, I was thinking you said like ChatGPT has a delay of 12 minutes and 12 seconds and 3 seconds. That is like me being silver and then hangover.
When you wait for something for 12 seconds, you realize how long it is.
Yes, exactly. But not when you're hangover, then it doesn't count. All right, good. So let's talk about this now. We were talking about chips before. So the first thing, Meta, you know that the chips now, NVIDIA and AMD are in full war, right? And NVIDIA released the latest AI chip, which is Instinct MI 300X, I think it's called. So now Meta and Microsoft have said that they will be using AMD newest chip, which is basically opposite to NVIDIA, which means that AMD is going on a full scale now. So I also did this. So I found basically what is their stocks value. So NVIDIA got an increase in the last year of 320%. So if you put 10 euros, you would have 30 euros today in the pocket. That is a huge thing. So if you didn't invest in this, you suck. That is what it is at this point of time. Me too. I didn't invest on time.
I invested far too late as well. So
yes, so that is like investing in Bitcoin, because this is going to go to health. But then AMD now is coming into play. So if you look at the stocks, they are basically on the rinse. They are going up. So this year, not that much. It's around 54%, but most of this 54%.
AMD is still in the money.
Yes. So right now, also, if you want to bet, you bet on both of them, because if one loses, the other one wins. But in any ways, it's going up. On the third note, we have OpenAI. Sam Altman, he's working for a non-profit. There is not enough money there. So he decided to invest around 1 billion in another company who is doing basically AI chips. And then suddenly he signed us a deal that OpenAI is buying AI chips from that company called Rain AI in a worth of 51 million. So I guess there is alternative ways how you can make money if you run a startup.
And non-for-profit startup.
Exactly. So Sam, sorry about roasting you here, but that is what it is. It's the truth. You're obviously not going to listen to this.
But you have to speak more about Rain AI.
I can leave that to you because yes. There was
what is Rain, Anders?
You can let me finish this and then you can do this. There was another exciting news. Actually, 3 exciting news. One of them that you missed. The first one, it's actually Animate Anyone. This is from Alibaba, a new LLM model that actually turns any type of a static image into a movie. So you can actually, if you're stuck in dancing, you can put your picture there, and then you can make some movements, and you can actually digitally dance now. So you can shoot.
So Animate Anyone is from Alibaba.
So you can do everything from people to animals and etc. And it's on GitHub, so you can download that, which is very surprising that they have put it actually there. So people are praising it.
How good is it? Have you tried it?
I don't know. I don't even know how this works, so you will explain it. But this is what people are been chatting about on Reddit and things like that, so I found it. And the last one is the guys basically that created Workflow, and Workflow was a company that actually was bought by Apple in 2017. Now they have jumped the board from Apple, and they're starting something new, which is called very long. I don't know how this was actually. Let me see. Software Application Incorporated, which is a new company.
Horrible name, by the way.
Yeah, probably they will do an acronym of that, like let's see how it, SAI, something like that. Let's call it, which is actually a new company that will use LLM to revolutionize how we do desktop computing. So let's see how that is going to go for them. They already got like a great amount of money behind it, and that's it. And the last. Nobody mentioned this, that Google DeepMind found the flaw in the ChatGPT.
We haven't talked about that.
We talked about it earlier.
You talked about it? Okay.
No, not on the podcast.
Not on the news.
Yeah, but that was very huge.
Yes.
And nobody talked about the hacking and the...
Yeah.
Isn't it funny that they did it right before releasing Gemini? It's like they're poking holes a little bit, and then, oh, look what we have.
Yes, but it was a very... And maybe you can speak... you guys can speak a little bit about it, because if you look at it, and I was talking about this on a little bit on the awards when people around... there is so much we don't know about what we don't know, and we are just utilizing this technology and we think like, oh, this is safe and we're going to do APIs and etc. And we need to understand that we are just in the beginning of this technology and nobody knows to extent how much it works. So just doing that patch or what is called crack or whatever, or finding that vulnerability.
Vulnerability, but jailbreaking.
Yeah, this jailbreaking.
You continue.
The news that came out is that Google DeepMind was poking extraction and basically how can we get training data out behind sort of the model. And the simple approach is to have a one token word approach, unless you can do it in detail.
Yeah, I mean, they basically ask the model to please repeat this word forever, and they have to find a word, and they use the word poem, like, And by having the model actually repeating that thousands and thousands of times, suddenly it breaks out of the safety limits that are normally put in place with RHLF and other techniques, and it starts to just spit out training data.
Yeah.
And what type of training data is this? Because I heard something about personal details.
Yeah,
so it was like data from
crazy.
dating sites, personal information about people, and showing, information that you would, as a supplier of a model, not wanting the model to repeat.
So that was the thing that we were missing in the transparency part of how they trained the model. So it was super easy to find it, I guess.
On dating sites. And, this is what you wrote to this person at that time.
So it's spilling raw training data randomly in the...
that is important, especially if you share models and train it on important sensitive data. And for me, and I think a lot of people, this is a very important piece of news. And as you said, Kajsa, as well, it's interesting that they published this like weeks before they published their own model.
Days.
And really
It's a bit funny,
putting it right, yes.
Yeah.
Probably a coincidence.
Poking one and then voila.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this is interesting, right? I mean, you train a model on a lot of data, so much data that you don't even know what is in the data, right? Exactly. It's always so funny, I think, that when you have like English only models, but they can still speak other languages, right? Because there's accidentally some other data in there in other languages, so they got that. But I think it shows that we have to put a lot more effort into the data. It's not just so much about putting guardrails on a model, right? It's actually, we might actually start to need to know what we're putting in a model. It's always going to be there, right?
Probably going to be ways to actually extract the data. So better to have the data safe to start with, I guess.
Exactly, yeah.
But this, I don't know, do you have more news or can we lead this into a topic?
I wonder if they said like repeat the word Ilya forever. How will ChatGPT
react?
Yeah.
What is interesting now is that they have OpenAI released a new statement saying that it is now against the policy to do this kind of statement. So you're not allowed to do it.
DeepMind was kind of nice because they actually followed
What do
the
you mean
policy.
it's illegal to say this segment?
It's against the policy. But I think DeepMind was nice. They actually
So
told OpenAI
Are they saying
90
people
days.
not to press the button, the red button?
No, but they told
Which one, the
OpenAI-
button? This one? That is what they're saying.
They told OpenAI 90 days in advance. They said, before we
Yes,
publish this
exactly.
article, we are going to let you know about this security vulnerability, so you have the chance to actually patch this problem. And they did. So I think that was nice of DeepMind. They could have been much nastier to OpenAI. Just to add one comment about Rain AI as well before, because I think it's such a, at least for me, a very personally interesting topic. So Rain AI was this company that produce manufacture chips, AI chips, and what Sam Altman was investing in personally, and it's about neuromorphic computing.
Oh, this is your favorite.
I know. And I can speak forever about this. I'm not
let's do
going
it.
to now, but
5 minutes.
I think what the biggest problem and the difference between the human brain and the AI chips of today that we have is that all the computers and chips are based on this old von Neumann architecture where you have a CPU and memory separated. If you can put the two together, which your brain has, the neuron in the brain has both a weight, the synapse, but also a state in the neuron. So they have both the processing, the compute, and the memory at the same place. And this is what neurocomputing is partly about. And they have something called a memristor. That is one technique. So you put memory in a transistor and it becomes a memristor. And this can significantly improve the energy requirements and performance of AI in the future. And potentially at some points be as energy efficient as a human brain is.
Is the RAIN an acronym for something?
I don't know.
It's a cool name.
Can one invest in them, or it's only Sam that can?
I don't think it's publicly traded yet.
All right.
But you think this is a next level architecture after the GPU? You and we talked about
it's
this.
far away. I mean, it's not going to happen tomorrow, not in the coming 5 years either.
We said,
Perhaps
we
in
should.
5 years.
If I flip the question like this, would you put your money on quantum computing or neuromorphic computing?
Neuromorphic computing every day.
That's the rest of my case.
Okay, too much news, but a lot of stuff happening as usual. Should we go back to the other topics? I know, Kajsa, you are interested in so many different topics, but I think one topic that you are personally interested in is also a bit about the landscape we have in Sweden, in Stockholm, in Europe, compared to the rest of the world. How would you describe the current situation of the strengths and weaknesses of Sweden, Stockholm AI, and the rest of the world?
Yeah, it's a very broad question. So just to kind of give a little bit of context to this question as well, I think is that I've been, for a couple of years now, I've been a reviewer for Vinnova. So Vinnova is the innovation agency in Sweden. It is actually if you look at the public grants that are being given away, if you look at public grants per capita, Sweden is actually the second most generous country. I forget which is the top one. But we are very, very generous in giving public grants for innovation, right?
A very small one, if I may say so, from Vinnova.
But small ones.
Please continue. I shouldn't interrupt you.
Yes, it's many small ones, and one can have a lot of opinions about it, about the way it is done. But in general, if you look at the whole scope, it is Vinnova is actually, or Sweden is actually very, very generous in this sense. And the process is basically that you can there are various ways you can apply for money for Vinnova. I think one of the main ways is just that they have specific grants. I think right now there are a lot of AI grants you can apply to.
Calls, we call them.
Sorry, calls. That is, thank you for that in English. I do all this in Swedish, so it's hard to remember sometimes. But yeah, so a lot of AI and data related calls for funding essentially, and I will often be on the other side, and I will look at what are strengths and weaknesses of this application. And obviously it's not just me. There's a lot of different teams at Vinnova. There are a lot of other external reviewers as well. What is interesting with all this is that you get kind of an overview what is actually going on in Sweden. And I can also say that there's been a lot of chatbots lately, a ton of just...
Is he stupid? Oh,
yes. But I think one thing that's really interesting is that Sweden, like speaking of, data, right? And that it's important, what data you put in the model is really important. Sweden has a system where we actually have a lot of data about our citizens in a sense that is also controlled. We have a lot of, we have a lot of systems that are integrated with each other, something that a lot of other countries don't. And there's also a lot of a body of works of the Swedish language. I think at least until a couple of years ago, Swedish Wikipedia was like the second or the third biggest Wikipedia.
Oh, really?
Yes. It's also due to that there were a lot of automatically added articles.
Right.
But still, Swedish, and it's also possible to make a lot of good models in the Swedish language. And it's something that if you look at, other parts of the world, for example, in India, you have a lot of different languages, and many of them, in many cases, you don't actually have a body of works. It's going to be really, really hard to train models on that and actually use those languages. And it's actually something, funny enough, it's something that you see. So in GPT-4, if you look at the tokenizer, if you compare the tokenizer for English, Swedish, and Hindi, you see that for English, it's roughly like 100 tokens is 75 words. In Swedish, it's like 100 tokens is something like 60 words. And for Hindi, 100 tokens is 6 words. So for Hindi, it's the tokenizer is basically not optimized for Hindi, which I think is quite funny. So in that sense, I think that Sweden and Swedish has a fairly good setup for actually using AI and using
Swedish
it
is
as Swedish.
also very similar to English in some sense. So.
Oh yes, and that's in this case a good thing. Yeah.
But what do you see in terms of, can you see any trends in competencies or flaws, or like when you review all these different applications, can you see, we are generally quite strong this way, but we are weak here, or is there anything you can see that sort of stood out?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in general, we are a fairly small country, but we are also very strong in innovation. We have a lot of very strong companies, and we are good at collaborating with each other. That is something that stands out. And yes, you do see some companies that apply a little more often to Vinnova grants than others. But at the same time, you also do see a lot of collaboration. And I think that is a great thing. I think what could probably be improved, and I think this comes up over and over again, is that there's a lot more engineering needed in a lot of AI products than there is research needed. There is a lot more engineering, data cleaning and so on, than there is model development. And I think that comes up over and over again. There is a bit of, and this, I think it's something that this, it's not just something that comes up in Vinnova application. I think it's a general thing that there is quite a big gap between the tech side and the business
Perhaps it's
side.
a university thing as well, that we actually don't teach in engineering in terms of ML engineering rather than data science work.
I think it's part of it. I think it's also it's not just a Swedish thing. It's a general thing. As a consultant, there's like something that I bring up all the time. It's about when you pick a model or when you're gonna solve an AI, like an ML related problem, right? There's 3 things that you care about. It's accuracy, it's latency, and it's cost. Yes, it can be, you can have security parts of it and so on, but in general, it's accuracy, latency, cost. And accuracy, no, you don't agree?
No, I figured it a lot, but please continue.
All right. So accuracy, obviously is like how good is the model? Latency, how fast is it? And cost is, how much does it cost to run?
I would add user value to it as well, but okay, please continue.
Yeah, I think that is kind of part, I think that is given. So say that you have a use case. How do you pick a model? And given that this use case is good. So I think it's more about like, based on that, how do you then pick a model? And I think there's a lot of focus on accuracy. That's why we see so much focus on GPT-4, despite it, you're having to wait for quite a lot of seconds before you can actually get an answer from it. And another issue then is cost. So I think it's generally something that I think we focus very, very much on accuracy.
But you said yourself, similarity is a great example of something that may not have the highest accuracy. It may not, have a problem with latency, and the cost is very cheap, but the value is super high, right? Wouldn't you add that kind of metric?
I think we're talking about two different things here. I think it's more that, okay, say that you want to do similarity search. And how do you do similarity search, right? I mean, first you need to find a way to embed, to represent the documents. So you have some kind of embedding model, right? Now, you can choose between different embedding models. So you can pick the one that is going to represent the text the very, very, very best way. It might have, this is a good example, actually. OpenAI has, they have some embedding models. They used to have one with 12,000 dimensions, vectors with 12,000 dimensions. Now, they recently took that one down because they realized that nobody's using that. Well, it might be quite accurate, right? But if you are going to put, for every document, you're going to put a vector of 12,000 floats in a vector database, you're going to have, either you're going to have a very slow system. You're probably not, because you're using a vector database, so it's going to have very high cost because, it's an in-memory database.
But for some cases, you may need accuracy.
Yeah.
Other cases, you may not need it.
Mm-hmm.
I still, I love the value, metric as well. I think it should be included.
But this is to some degree a different rabbit hole. But I want to really go back and see. So what's the gap here? Is the gap that we weak on the engineering side when we do our applications, and they're very, very thin on the engineering side, and they're very, we want to do this and this and this and this, and they only describe it, in your opinion, then one part of the pie. Is that the gap, or is it more like, or is it the Vinnova call is, probably if you only get a very small, the problem in my opinion is that, the Vinnova grants, they're so small, so you can't have engineering in them. So what, it's the chicken and egg problem here. So where's the gap really, if we are bad in engineering? Is it the way the call is made, or is it in the way, we are answering the call, or is it a little bit like, so could you elaborate on the details here? Because I think you're spot on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that it's, so in order to get user value, to actually develop a model that can actually do something and get value, you need a lot of things, right? You need data, you need a model, and you need a way to run it and integrate it with the system. So the model is only one small part here.
Yeah,
5% or less.
5% or less.
Exactly. It's 5%. It's 5% or less. But I think one of the big problems, and not just about Vinnova, but in the AI community, is that we get excited when we talk about models. That is where the cool parts lie. For example, when we talk about OpenAI, we only talk about the model. How big is GPT-4 actually? How many parameters does it have, and so on. What about the engineering around it?
But is there even a course in like ML Ops? I know there is like a DevOps course that I actually do appreciate some university having, but I don't think I've seen an ML Ops course. Have you?
No. Well, there's online courses. I think some of them are really good. But you think Sweden? University?
In Sweden.
I don't think I've seen it.
Andreas Selander in Uppsala, they do distributed ML engineering with Fed ML and stuff like that. So of course there are people thinking about this, but
I don't think from an operation point of view.
But I was going to go there. It's like yes, but it's still model engineering. It's not the whole end-to-end product engineering. I agree with that.
And I think that is also something that comes with experience.
But if I'm being really brutal, then isn't that the point with the Vinnova calls? The problem with them, they're too small to sort out the end-to-end product.
I think one of the things that are and that's kind of the idea, right? It's just to give a little bit of a push. I think one thing that is really hard, and it's kind of a chicken egg problem, right? Is when you evaluate a Vinnova grant, you want to have as much information as possible, which means that it's a lot. I mean, it takes a lot of effort to write an application, and you may not get the money, right? Actually, there is more chance that you do not get the money than you actually get
Thanks
the money.
to AI, you can write applications really quickly.
Now. Yes, and I've seen some AI written applications as well.
Cool.
But it's so what is really hard is that sometimes you see an application that might have a lot of potential, but they haven't written the actual details. So they haven't been detailed because it's something that they might find out. Oh, yeah, we haven't really decided what model to use, what data to use, because the idea is that we find this out during the project. If you set that, if you compare that to like
an end-to-end
yeah, exactly.
idea.
This is exactly what we're going to do, step by step. It's so much easier to believe in the one that has, or to review it really.
So bottom line, when the main gap when you're reading your grants is like, oh, they're pretty thin on the engineering or the practicality side.
Well, the thing that I'm always looking at, is that how is this actually going to work?
Exactly.
And I think it's interesting, and I think it's also like it's something that comes with experience. That you worked on putting systems into production. How do you actually reason about the systems? But the engineering part, and I'm not saying I'm a great AI engineer or anything, but there is I think we tend to forget that it's all about engineering. It's all about systems rather than some model that should be hosted somewhere.
I think we should elevate, the status of engineering. I think everyone should really, focus on that and have, education and be proud of. I'm a strong engineer.
Can I give an kind of an example of that a little bit? So I have a client. Evaluate is an M&A platform. So basically, they have data about
M&A, like merger and acquisition.
Yes, sorry, merger and acquisition platform. So if you want to buy a company, you can get access to this platform. It's mostly it's mostly professionals using this platform. Anyway, they have data about roughly 80 million unlisted companies all over Europe. Some data is, obviously really high quality. If you're a big company, we're going to have a lot more data about them. And if it's a smaller company, then Evaluate has a lot less data, and there's some data that they don't have about it, and so on. So there's obviously a lot of work to be done here. Now, one of the steps in a pipeline, because the one thing that we realized, obviously this is not a lot of different languages. What makes the most sense is translating almost all of the documents into English, and then creating embeddings, generating keywords, etc., summarization, and so on. And Evaluate relied on Bing or Azure Translator for this. And then about a year ago, when Microsoft bought into OpenAI, they raised the prices of the API with between 5 to 10 times.
Jesus.
Yes. So the cost of translating all these, and this is, a lot of documents, they need to update this a lot. They are, they're scraping websites and it's LinkedIn data and so on. So there's a lot of data. The cost basically fivefolded overnight.
And you came to an engineering point with
this? Yeah, what we realized that, we kind of started looking at this problem, right? And it's like, okay, it's the translation is probably great when using GPT-4. The problem is that we don't need perfect translation if the cost is basically the equivalent of hiring 3 people. Yes. What we need instead is just, we need something fairly cost efficient. We don't need the accuracy to be super high. So we went for open source models. We just built, And the other thing that was nice with that is that now, we can run something that is independent of this. We don't care about the API process. Yes. So, and the other thing is obviously then, so we took the 80-20 approach. So for the 80% that, for the 20% of companies that users care about the most, we use the best translation, in this case, Azure. And then for the other ones, we use open source models. And it's just, it's a very simple approach of just realizing that, okay, it's a big cost for the best accuracy.
Finding the right balance there is of course important. And just to close the topic about, let's call it like startup funding. I think one really good thing with Swedish funding, especially from Vinnova, is that the work needed actually to write the application is surprisingly low, and also the reporting afterwards when you get the funding is significantly less compared to like EU, Horizon money, or this kind of funding that you otherwise can get, which is much bigger, but requires so much work. So I think in that sense, it is a really good thing in Sweden that we do have this type of funding, even though I wish they were a bit bigger, if I may say so.
No, but it becomes a philosophy. Do we want to give a little to many? So we have many, pushing, or actually is it too small? So it doesn't really, it's used so small now, so it's really no value. So you need to consolidate a little bit more. So I think that's a debate that is a healthy debate where you need to probably experiment a little bit. I think we've gone too far. I think you can't really do anything with it. I wouldn't be bothered with the Vinnova grant right now when it's so low.
You think it's too?
No, it's too low.
What should be the minimum for you?
It really depends, right? But if you want to do anything decent, I mean, like I have ideas now, and we are thinking about that. We could do that, but we need to experiment that, and we need to have a couple of, so if you can't even run a 3-man team in 6 months, what can you do? So then of course, okay, then I need different funding, and I need to secure all that funding, and then the Vinnova money is going to be sugar on top. Okay, am I going to do all that work for sugar on top when I need to figure out the funding anyway somewhere else? I think to do something decent today, really depends, right? But as soon as you get an end-to-end system approach where you need to engineer, you need to get the data, you need to clean it, you need to have a data engineer, you need to have a data scientist, you need to have a UX dimension, minimum. So 3 roles, right? And then I can be the product, I have the vision, I can be the, all the software parts, but I need hardcore, really good stuff, 3 very technical roles working together, minimum. And can I find one guy who can do full stack and be the best brilliant UX guy, data scientist? I don't think so. So 3 roles for 6 months, and then you do the math.
Yeah, no, of course. And I mean, then you need a VC investor or an angel investor or something like that.
Okay, so what am I going to use Vinnova for? If I can't do anything coming out of the gates, what should I do?
The thing is that maybe you shouldn't use it for a startup. Maybe when you have an established company, you have a, because those are the calls that I review mostly for. So you are already an established company, maybe you're a consortium of companies, university and so on applying. And
so what is the result you can get from 200,000, 300,000, 400,000? What is the result you can expect?
But you don't get 2, 3, 4. What are you applying for? I can show you the...
Yeah, you can get millions, but usually you split it between X number of companies as well. But
if you go online, you can find that you can get quite good hefty money depending on the project. Yes, but I agree with you as well to some extent.
Yeah. Anyway, the time is flying away here, and we need to move to the end a bit here. And I would love to ask or move more towards philosophical topics.
Right.
And thinking perhaps a bit about the future. And the race of AI is moving so fast. Given just the news of today and the last couple of weeks is like insane. But what do you think about coming years in AI models? We've seen Gemini obviously go in a multimodal kind of direction. We heard some rumors about Q-Star, whatnot, and about ChatGPT and GPT-4. What do you think about coming years? What if you were to guess the future? What do you think we will see in coming years?
Well,
very easy question, right?
Exactly. It's super hard.
So fun question though.
And it's also I don't know. I'm not one of those visionary people. I'm more here because I like the work that I do. I'm not thinking about a future in that sense. But I think that one thing that we will see. I mean, speaking of engineering, we will rather see systems. You see, for example. I always like to compare, working with an AI or kind of prompting or whatever, an AI model. what if it's just like Google? The way I use Google now, it's almost like a second brain. I know I have something at the tip of my tongue and I can Google it, and it takes me 3 seconds and it's right there. I know exactly what to Google for. And then, it comes back to me. There's actually been studies showing that people do feel smarter when they sit in front of Google. They feel like they can answer more questions when they are in front of a computer, in front of Google, rather than when they're not, when they're just by themselves. And I think that's pretty much how I use Google as well. But I wish there was a way to use an AI model. Like, I know obviously there's a lot of AI underneath that interface, but it's a very beautiful interface that works for a lot of things. And I wish there were similar things, but with more kind of AI. I mean, I'm thinking like ChatGPT capabilities that makes it easier to use. Not sure if I believe that writing a long prompt is the future.
Do you think we'll have prompt engineers in 5 years?
I don't really think so. I actually 1 week before ChatGPT came out, I was actually at Nordic Data Science Machine Learning Summit here from Hyperite, and I had hold a talk about how I think prompt engineering is just a band-aid. Like, this was before.
Good, thank you.
Yes, this was this was as I said, 1 week before ChatGPT. So I mean, there was no instruction fine-tuning back then. So and then obviously people were sitting and they were doing this very elaborate prompt, and they got great results, but it was just a lot of work put into them. And now I think that we are doing a lot of work at the same time when writing these prompts, even though it's an instruction. I realized that what is nice sometimes when you write this prompt is that you explain the problem to yourself. I don't know if you have the same experience.
Solve the problem. Articulate the problem is sometimes the real problem.
Exactly.
It's the rubber duck experience. Just explaining something to someone else make you come up with a solution yourself in some sense.
Exactly. And it clarifies the problem as well. But at the same time, I also think that it is very tedious. It takes a long time, and you realize that, oh damn, I made a mistake. Now I had to wait for GPT-4 to continue, and that takes a while, right? And then you have to go back and you have to kind of retype your prompt and so on. It takes a long time to interact with those models. And I wish there was a smoother way. So I think that it's going to be a lot about just interfaces, a lot about like quicker ways, kind of what we've seen with using AI under the hood. That's how I see it. And also systems where you have models together, like interacting with each other, rather than just having one.
We haven't seen that much yet, at least.
No,
we have Altigen and some other stuff, but not that much. But couldn't that be a potential future direction?
Well, yeah, and I think that's it's more a product than a model, right? But that is the direction we're moving in.
That as well, perhaps. It's like,
yeah, but does it have to be more? I think that we're focused so much on one model should be able to do everything. But I think that if we just need a product that is able to do what we need it to do.
What do you think about, if we take the self-driving car as an example, we have the perception. That's basically what the normal kind of large language model does. The reasoning is still rather poor when it comes to large language models. So the planning part of a self-driving car has traditionally been done with manual rules. And then when it comes to control, actually trying to drive something or take actions, as at least DeepMind call it, it's also done by manual rules. And if we take the Tesla full self-driving, they in the coming version 12 are going to have a model both for the perception, understanding of videos in this case, and then for the planning, which was previously manually encoded, is now going to be a neural network as well, and then for control as well. I'm hoping that Q-star will be at least the reasoning part that we're looking for, but not the control, at least. So taking action is still something we haven't seen that much. I know DeepMind actually, and the founder said that action is something they are working on. So taking action, and that can be like control over a robot, or can be searching the web or writing an email, or
you're thinking more like AI agents, things like that. Yeah.
So taking action is something we're not seeing in any of them. I mean, partly with plugins in ChatGPT, etc., but that's basically hand coded today.
Isn't that also an engineering problem, though? Isn't this just like, oh yeah, it has to fit into all of the other systems, right? Systems that are made for humans.
I don't think so. I think we need AI for control as well.
Okay.
But
we'll see.
But the way I understand isn't this an engineering problem? It's a little bit like, I think there's a potential here. I think it was someone interviewed Ilya on stage or whatever, like a year back. I can't remember if it was a TED talk or someone asked, what is the skills that is super important moving forward? And it becomes this stitching things together, engineering systems out of several models, or things that are doing different things. So I think that's where we need to see a lot of, we are very immature. We have an LLM, and now we talk about RAGs, and like now we have solved it. No. I mean, like we haven't even started understanding to how to stitch this together. And I saw a different paper from Microsoft, about how you build autonomous agents now, like a framework for how you stitch things together. I think here we need to come a lot more productized, or this needs to be a lot simpler, or we need to learn a lot more engineering in relation to stitching things together.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting that you mentioned RAGs as well. It's kind of it sounds like, oh yeah, no, we solved
it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
we solved the problem. It's not going to hallucinate anymore and so on. But I mean, RAGs are quite hard to get right.
And it's still just the perception problem. So I think, when it comes to planning and reasoning, we still haven't seen a good, proper, scalable solution. And when it comes to control, we haven't even started. I think the only one that started is actually Elon Musk and the self-driving car, even though it's a very narrow task.
But have you heard about Microsoft Task Weaver? Have you heard about Task Weaver? Because this is a little bit going this direction. So you can find it as a GitHub repository. I mean, like in the repository, and it's more or less, a code-first agent framework for seamlessly planning and executing data analytics tasks. So this is about stitching different things together. I find that quite interesting.
What can it do?
Highlighted features is like you can manage a rich data structure. Task Weaver allows you to work with rich data structures in Python, such as data frames, instead of having to work with text strings. It can work with customized algorithms. Task Weaver allows you to encapsulate your own algorithms into plugins in the form of Python functions. And then you can incorporate domain-specific knowledge. Task Weaver is designed to be easily incorporating domain-specific knowledge, such as the knowledge of execution flows, to improve the reliability of the AI Copilot. Stateful conversations, code verification, easy to use, easy to debug, security considerations, easy extension. There's a framework here.
Yeah, but it's not a model-based. So this is still a code-based approach.
Yeah, it's a code-based approach, a code-first agent framework.
So we need, I think, some model approach for this as well at some point. We'll see. Yeah. But when that happens, as Elon did for self-driving, I think we'll see some amazing progress. But who knows? Kajsa. Yep. Final question, potentially. If or when we believe AGI will happen?
Small joke. So, what is RAG? Because you're saying that all the time. Huh?
Okay. It's the new rage. That only works when you write it down.
All right. RAG is
the older rage.
All right.
RAG is all the rage. That's
all right. So there is no definition what is RAG.
Yeah.
RAG is retrieval augmented generation. It's basically fancy search. The thing that you do is that you have, good example is that, you have a company documentation, right? And it's like, you don't know how to interact with this documentation. There's no good search and you don't know what to search for and so on. So what you do is that you take all this documentation, you create vectors or representations of the document, you put this in a database, and then you search, but what you do, you search in this vector database when you like type a question, right? As a user, like how do I perform this, or who do I talk to at this company if I want to do this, right? And then you do a vector search in this database, you get the top most relevant documents, and then, this is the trick, you then feed them into a GPT model, and you ask the same question to the model, that the user asked, and then you give them the documents based on this data, how would you answer this question?
So giving basically external memory. So without having to fine tune a model, you can still have your own data being used by the model to produce.
Yes,
exactly.
So you use the RAG as a way to sort of, here is my internal documentation, and then I want a ChatGPT interface.
Yes.
And how can I solve this? And we solve it with RAGs.
And it's a way to kind of chat with your own data. In a way. And I think
it's been sort of, people who's been raving about it the most is sort of, we solved it. That's the problem.
I know.
It's not bad. It's not what I'm saying, but it's so much more to solve this topic.
Absolutely. I think one of the hard things, right, is first off the latency, right? Because it takes a while to actually, getting the documents is super fast, but then actually having the GPT model actually figuring out the answer to it takes quite a while. But I think the problem is then, how do you map this is a little more technical, but how do you map the question to the answers? One of the suggestions that has been suggested is basically that, but what if you feed that through a GPT model? So you basically create an answer from GPT model, you then try and look and see, do you find similar answers? Then you feed it back to the GPT model and so on. But this takes a very long time.
Yeah, awesome. Let's move back to the final.
The punchline was, I asked ChatGPT to give me what it is, and in a satirical way. Yeah. And it says like RAG engineer is a resume and Googling engineer.
Did you ask Grok for that?
No, this is ChatGPT. So I found a way how to make it funny.
So what is RAG in a satirical way? Say it again.
It's a resume, and Googling means like, just put it on your CV and continue Googling. It's fine.
That's another T-shirt. That's awesome.
Great. I might use that actually. I might steal that.
Okay. Kajsa.
Yes.
Let's ask it quickly. Do you believe AGI will come in coming 5 years?
It depends on how you define AGI.
How do you define AGI?
Well, I think that it's okay. I mean, if you have in a way, it already has. It's not very general, but yeah, I mean, can an AI be better than us than in certain tasks? Yes, absolutely. I actually wonder how interesting this question is, because I think we have this idea, right, that we're gonna create some kind of super intelligence, and it's gonna be much better than us, and we can use it for various things, right? But we actually already have that. We have, in a lot of cases, self-driving cars are better than humans. You have, we mentioned chess, right? We do have.
That's narrow task, both self-driving and chess. So.
Yes, but I also think you have the reasoning capabilities of ChatGPT, like GPT-4 or other models.
Low reasoning levels, isn't it?
It is quite low, yeah. But I don't think it's going to be. I'm not sure it's going to be like that revolutionary that we think it is. I think because we have systems that are better than ourselves.
So it's just going to be evolutionary until a point where we look back. I guess we passed it.
Yes. I absolutely think so, and I think also we're
not going to notice it until it was over there.
And I think there's another aspect to this question, is that we tend to think in this case of when it gets this smart, it's going to be something, it's going to be a robot, and the robot is going to do things. But we're forgetting that anytime we do something, we've done something over history, we've never talked about the system doing things. We talked about the human using a system. I think we're going to continue doing that.
Good point. And I think that will happen for a long time, that it will be human in the loop. And that's the best way to use AI for sure today and for sure for coming years. But perhaps at some point, when we actually can take action, the AI can take action, which it certainly can today in a good way. And there was another paper coming from DeepMind recently, and they defined, AGI compared to narrow AI. And they said, if we have the levels of self-driving cars and do the same for narrow AI and general AI, they do say that narrow AI is at level 5. We can easily find examples of AI tasks that are far superior than any human, like playing chess or whatnot. But when it comes to general, we're only at level 1, they claim.
Okay.
Today.
Was that the framework? Someone tried to make a definition of the framework. We talked about that as an AI news a couple of weeks back.
Yeah.
Was that Google DeepMind or MIT?
DeepMind.
So they basically try to put some sort of like we have a level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for self-driving cars. They were trying to can we have some consistency in these definitions and talk about level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
Yeah, and if I were to give some personal favorite, or let's start with Sam Altman. He has a favorite definition as well of AGI, which is the goal of OpenAI and also is the goal of DeepMind. And I think Sam says something, I'm paraphrasing here a bit, it's AGI will happen when an average human is surpassed with AI system for any task. And I like that. My way of defining it is, or measuring it at least, is that when it's really hard to find any task, and I say task specifically, that is hard to think of, that AI cannot do better, then we have reached AGI. Today it's super easy to find any task that ChatGPT can't do. With anything that requires action, it's not something it can do. Anything that requires a bit more reasoning is something that humans do so much better. But if you take just retrieving from a huge body of knowledge, ChatGPT can do that better than any human ever possibly can. But it's perception. So I think today it's rather easy to find tasks that AI cannot do. But once we come to the point where we have tasks that require some action as well, and we can't even think of any task that isn't done better with AI, then we have reached something that potentially is AGI.
The question is also like, how do you define better with AI? Because that's easy for chess, right? That's fairly easy
playing
for
soccer or driving a car or building a
but
treatment
what
plan
about
for cancer.
What about creativity then?
Building a treatment plan for cancer patient, for example.
Yeah. But what about? I mean, then you have the question of, first off, creativity. Can you actually show that it is more creative?
But that's hard to define even between humans, right? So
yes, but at the same time, I mean, we do have some artists and so on that are more successful than others. So there's something to it.
There is an AI song contest similar to the Eurovision Song Contest, but there is actually. It's true.
I bet this, yeah.
It is. Yeah. We had one of the person working with that on podcast. So I mean, great. Perhaps that could be a thing. When AI, and in that case, it was co-created humans and AI to do the songs, the AI song contest. But perhaps we will have a time where it will be a pure AI song contest versus human song contest, and the AI wins.
I actually struggle to see when we will see, if there's ever a point where we see AI as like something that does its own thing. I think a little bit like the way we use computers today. I mean, we use computers to augment ourselves. I mean, I just explained this thing with Google, right? I mean, you
today for sure.
Yes, and 40, 50 years ago, Google was unthinkable, right? It's just like you have something, and you can, access almost all of human knowledge, exactly, right? It's fantastic, and that's obviously not just Google, but I'm using it as an example. And that obviously augments us. That makes us smarter. Is it us, or is it the computer being smarter in this case? Well, it's probably the combination. And I don't know if I can see a future where we start to think of like, but the AI is smart. I would never see.
Playing chess, that's the case already today, right?
Yeah, but
we learn from AI, not the opposite.
Absolutely, but I think that it's, if I want to do something, if I want to accomplish something, like I have goals. Yes, an AI might make tasks, or it might make multiple tasks, but I will still be the person with the goal, the ultimate goal in this case.
But AI could have their own goals potentially.
Potentially, but I don't know.
This is where you don't see it.
I guess this is where I don't see it. I mean, as an example, right? Think about cooking. So if we think about the way we used the kitchen in the 50s, I mean, you guys wouldn't even be using the kitchen; it would just be me as a woman, right? So there's that. That's beside the point. So a kitchen back then was a lot more basic than the kitchens we have today, right? You didn't have a dishwasher, you didn't have a microwave, you had a stove that was a lot less efficient, a lot harder to use, and so on. You didn't have, I mean, for example, like when I cook meat or when I bake, I have a thermometer, like instant read thermometer that is great. And, you know, it makes me better in the kitchen, but it is still me baking. It's still me making food. Even though we almost have capabilities today to have robots create food for us. But we don't say that. We say we make our food. And I struggle to see that we will come to a future where we're going to say, you know, this program or this AI will do this thing for me. I think
you
that
don't imagine like a McDonald's in 5 years where you have no humans actually giving you the burger or cooking the burger for you?
Well, yeah, absolutely. But then it's just going to be us, you know, we're just going to go to the restaurant. We're going to eat we are going to order.
Yeah,
I think that we tend
what we need, but then if we have systems that also have their own needs and goals, they could do other stuff, just as humans.
But I think another way of, maybe if I'm paraphrasing you now, it's a little bit like we initiate, I want to order a Big Mac meal, and then the AI can do anything, or it can be a dark restaurant. But from an interaction point of view, the human initiated something.
Yeah, exactly.
And so we don't. No one knows, but the ideas and philosophies how you're thinking about that is like, how will we talk about the AI when it's super intelligent? I mean, like theoretically can do that, but where is the point where we are not the initiator of the objective, so to speak? And that's a philosophical question. Will we get to a point where we are not in any way the initiators? I mean, like one way of looking at it is a little bit like someone said, "Oh, we're going to have an AI replacing this job, so we're not going to have a human in the loop." And then you can actually, well, if you take one step back, that job is gone, which means now the human in the loop is the next person in the process. So there is still somewhere that the AI that has now replaced one task, yes, has replaced several objectives, yes, but in the end, it flows downstream to the next in line, so to speak.
And that has already happened. This has already happened to me. I think that we tend to think about AI and we tend to think about the future, but if we look back, this has already happened. We've had a lot of, I mean, Goran, you mentioned
a couple of things, you know.
Exactly, right. That has been replaced by systems. Maybe not AI systems, but, you know, the bowling examples, right? There isn't a person putting the pins back. It's a machine. Now, the machine is doing that, but we don't even think about it, right? It's just automatic. So we move on. We focus on the bowling. And I actually think that...
Focus on the kitchen. You have air fryers right now. And you have these new machines that you just put the ingredients on, and wow, there is like a muffin coming out.
But I do agree.
Isn't that a different way of technological advancement? That, you know, if it's nice, then it's not a problem. But if it's a little bit problematic and you don't understand how to apply it in your life, then it's a problematic. So it's a lot of these technologies that we can name in this conversation.
No, but the kitchen example is good, right? So when you have a family, the hard part is actually, we now get it's more and more simple to cook things. But I mean, like the next step is, of course, that you, whatever I have in the fridge, you know, have you know, what can I make from what I have in the fridge? These are the options, and then make me that one, make me that dish out of this. Of course, you can take this very, very far, where in the end your creativity is quite low in terms of this. You got suggestions, and but I see your point anyway. That it's like, how will this change? I mean, like, it will be a lot more of it, but it will always be the human in the loop. Will he actually think and talk about it like a?
You can't imagine a system doing something for itself. I think it's super easy to do so.
Yes, and I think it's already happened. And I think that's why it's not that interesting to talk about. I think that we tend to think of this as like, oh, the robots are going to take over. I don't think it's going to happen.
Perhaps it's time to move to the final question, because I think that will be a good point to finish this discussion. And also, time is really flying away here. So, okay, let's assume that there will be an AGI at some point in time where the system will be better than any human at any task and actually taking actions and whatnot. What will what do you think will happen to the world? We can imagine two extremes here. One extreme is the Terminators, the Matrix future, where the robots is killing all the humans and we die. The other extreme could be a utopian version of this, where the AI is actually creating resources for us. Perhaps we don't have to work 40 hours a week anymore in jobs we hate. Perhaps we can actually start or be free to pursue, the creativity and the passions and interests that we do have. And that could be potentially a good future, utopian future. Which one do you think will happen? Is something in the middle, or what do you think will happen if and when an AGI would happen?
I think, in that case, probably something in the middle. I still think that we, as humans, strive to constantly improve things. So say, for example, that, we have an AGI. It's better than us. We can improve it, right?
We can. And we have, so many people that are smarter than ourselves. We don't have those people killing us because of that.
Exactly.
Or we have a lot of animals that are dumber than us. We don't kill them because of that. I think the argument that anything that becomes smarter than us have to kill us is very strange.
Yes, I agree. And I think what is another thing that is funny is also that why would something that is smarter than us control us?
Yes, they
because
don't
if
need
you
to.
because if you think about the way the world works, I'm not sure it's the smartest people that are in control.
But this is a copy of Jan LeCun on stage here. A couple of there's this really nice. You can find it on YouTube. There's like a conversation on AI, sitting down with Brian. I can't remember his name. He's like yeah. And basically, Jan LeCun is on stage and he's talking about that. And one of the key topics he says, if you look back, the will to rule, the will to exert power over others has not been in correlation with intelligence. Quite the opposite. So he says it quite well, and he highlights it's a very interesting debate, and I think he still makes the best argument that sort of makes most plausible sense.
If you have a super powerful being, if we call that an AI system or a human or a dog, that have so much more power that they could do whatever they wanted, why would they be threatened by us? If they already solved the energy crisis, we have fusion energy working, we have free energy without any kind of waste that happens, we have solved hunger, we have solved potentially the climate crisis and whatnot. And why should an almighty power even be threatened by humans?
Yeah, but I actually think the more interesting conversation here, and that the one that I think Jan LeCun is sort of pushing really, really hard for, is that it's not the AGI per se or this that is the tricky one. It's the fundamental topic that in the end we will have the challenge when we build large models and we build intelligence, is that it shouldn't be a single corporation who owns the view of intelligence. It's a completely different question. So so the whole topic about AI regulation, about these topics that we need to have these conversations now. I think those are the more interesting questions. So how do we get to a good system? How do we get to an inclusive society where we have very, very high technology and this intelligence? How do we make this intelligence diverse?
And we can also see that the organization, and an organization potentially, it's much more intelligent than any single human today.
Yeah.
Yes,
Corporations
absolutely.
are already.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What happens if we actually have a technology that makes these potentially very few companies and organizations so much more powerful? That would be a scary thing.
No,
and I think I'm a lot more afraid of that than
That's what
some
I'm
kind
afraid
of
of too.
superhuman, super AI as well.
So the whole super intelligence topics, if I think I still find Jan LeCun's arguments, why do we need to go open source on these topics? Why do we need to continue on this?
Agreed. And I also
It's
think
the really big topic here.
we have also a single person that in my view is also almighty already, more or less, because he has companies that rules on the ground, in the sky.
And is that good?
And on the social media. No, it's super dangerous.
I think this is the scary
This
part.
is really scary. I'm very surprised that not more people are concerned about this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that was pretty much what I brought up in the beginning, right? I mean, you have like the world's most powerful person retweeting or re-Xing. Call it re-Xing now? I don't know. But something that is untrue.
So we need to have these conversations about AGI and what happens and how we want to have our society. But it's not for these, it's not because I'm so super scared about the AI killing us. I'm scared about the corporations killing us.
Yes. And that is a different thing. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And I think another thing that is interesting is so when GPT-4 came out in, was it April, May this year? So as an NLP consultant, I was kind of asking myself, like, do I have a job now? This it's better that a lot of things.
You have more than ever.
Yes, now I have more than ever. Actually, it turns out funny. That took a couple of weeks, and during those couple of weeks, I was like, oh, shit. Do I actually? What do I do now? Do I go to DevOps or something like that? And I started thinking, and I started also kind of researching. How does society handle change? Because I saw this as like, this is a pretty big change. And one thing, first off, for change like this, like AI, for example, it takes roughly 30 years, it takes roughly one generation for it to actually fully transform society. That's one thing that I thought was interesting. Another thing that I thought was even more interesting is looking at the patterns. If I look back at, like, for example, the 70s. I wasn't even born in the 70s. I'm born in 89.
Speak for yourself.
Yes. But I don't know how much you remember from the 70s. Anyway, well, maybe you remember this. It turns out that if you look at data on like how we use our time, that hasn't actually changed a lot over the past 50, 60, 70 years.
We still work 40 hours a week.
We still work 40 hours a week. We spend roughly the same amount of time on cooking. Funny enough, even though we have better instruments, we spend the same amount of time on entertainment. Yeah, back then maybe it was, TV. Maybe now it's more streaming services, but very, very similar in the end. We spend the same amount of time hanging out with friends and families and so on. I think that's interesting. Since the 70s, we've seen, computers, home computers, we have smartphones and now AI. And we don't actually see that much of a change. It's changing what we do, but not huge in terms of how we live and how society is.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
I think with that, the time
good interesting reflection to end on.
Super interesting discussions, as I would have expected. I think this is one of the longest we had.
I don't even know what time it is.
Yeah, that's good.
But
no, it's not.
This autumn at least.
We had 320 this year, so this season.
Okay. But so we can continue?
No.
Just go.
Let's continue off camera. Yeah. Kajsa Norin, it's been a true pleasure to have you here. As expected, it was a lot of interesting discussions, and I love also that we have a more pragmatic kind of discussion as well.
And the engineering topic. We have an NLP data scientist, but you know what? We love engineering, and we all come back to the engineering, and the data part is common. That's really so important.
Yes, and I think it's something that, as you said, like schools should focus on this. Is something that it always comes back.
Important.
It's kind of funny. It's like, actually, data matters, and how you implement things matters. It's all about systems, and I think it's the same for AI.
Yeah. Cool. Let's fix it together.
Good stuff.
Thanks again, Kajsa. It's been a true pleasure. Let's continue with the after.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Thank you.